Chapter 4038. Then why is she crying so hard? Gong Fan shook his head with an indifferent expression. Xiao Chen felt helpless too. Even though he sympathized with Qing'e, he didn't know how to comfort a crying girl. Just like that, Qing'e was in a daze for the entire day and had no energy left. That was how Gong Fan went about his business. However, something happened in the afternoon. Look. Where's Qing'e's love letter? Let me see who it's for. During lunch break, a mischievous boy took a book from Qing'e's desk and realized that Qing'e had written a few pages of a love letter. Hence, he took advantage of the fact that Qing'e wasn't in the classroom to announce it. The boy took a look and showed it to everyone, saying, "Wow, it's for Yo-Yo. Let me read it out loud for all of you." Hence, the boy read out the contents of the love letter to everyone with great emotion. "Yo-Yo, do you know? I've liked you since the first time I saw you. Even though you don't like to talk and ignore me, it doesn't affect my love for you. At first, I was curious about you and didn't understand why you didn't pay attention in class. But no matter what the questions were, they couldn't stump you. I feel like you're Superman." The boy read out the love letter with great emotion. The others crowded around and fought over it from time to time, wanting to see Qing'e's love letter with their own eyes. Just then, Qing'e walked into the classroom with a stack of homework books. She had just returned from the teacher's office. As she was the class representative, she had to go to the teacher's office every afternoon to get her graded homework. She wasn't in a good mood. When she entered the classroom and saw many people crowding around the podium, she didn't pay much attention to it. It wasn't until she heard some familiar phrases when the homework books were distributed that she looked at the podium in surprise. She saw everyone sizing her up with smiles on their faces. Some of them looked at her with ridicule, some snickered, some looked at her with contempt, and some looked at her with disdain. Those piercing gazes seemed to be mocking her for thinking too highly of herself. The boy laughed and said, "Qing'e, you're indeed the language class representative. Your writing style is so good." As he spoke, he proudly waved the love letter in his hand and playfully stuck out his tongue. Qing'e shuddered, and her face flushed red with shame and indignation. You stole my notebook." "Notebook? Is this a notebook?" This boy doesn't get along with Qing'e very well. In the past, during self-study, Qing'e was also a disciplinary committee member. She was a very serious girl and was very serious about rules. However, there were always some naughty children in the class who did not abide by the rules of self-study, including this boy. She had remembered his name more than once, so the boy had always mocked her for being a tattletale and went against her at every turn. Taking advantage of Qing'e's absence, the boy secretly flipped through her desk. Unexpectedly, he found a love letter secretly written to Yo-Yo, so he spread the news. Qing'e flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Li Xicheng, what are you doing? I didn't expect that as the class committee member and the language class representative, you didn't study hard and wanted to learn how to date like an adult. You even wanted to confess to Yo-Yo. Why don't you take a look at yourself? Yo-Yo is so outstanding. Would he like you?" Chapter 4039. Give it back to me. Qing'e was so angry that her face was livid. She walked over and tried to snatch the notebook from his hand. "Give it back to me." "Huh! I'm not giving it back." Li Xicheng gripped the notebook tightly in his hand and snorted coldly at her. "Who told you to keep complaining and remembering my name? Now I've found out that you're in a relationship. You're a class committee member, yet you're leading a student in a relationship. What would your mother, the head of teaching, think if word got out? You! Give it back to me." Qing'e was so angry that she cried and screamed. Li Xicheng wanted to tease her. "I'm not giving it back. Why don't you come and snatch it from me?" Li Xicheng jumped onto the podium and held the notebook high. Qing'e could not reach it no matter how hard she tried. She was not as tall as him to begin with. Now, she could not snatch it from him. "Do you know Yo-Yo's family background? You're not even pretty enough. Why would anyone take a fancy to you? His father is the chairman of Shengyu Corporation and is worth hundreds of millions. His mother is the popular movie queen Yun Shusha. Are you worthy of him?" "What?" As soon as Li Xicheng finished speaking, the others exclaimed, "Yo-Yo's mother is a superstar? If Li Xiqing had not said it, many people would not have known. Yes. My dad said it. My dad once attended a cocktail party held by Shengyu Corporation and saw Yo-Yo standing with his parents. Many celebrities attended the party. I saw Hua Jin holding Yo-Yo. Wow. Hua Jin. I love Hua Jin so much. Is what you said true? If you don't believe me, come back and ask Yo-Yo. Li Xiqing was quite proud. It seemed that he was the only one in the class who knew about Yo-Yo's family background. A smug expression appeared on his face. Qing'e was also a little stunned. She did not know about Yo-Yo's family background, so she was a little surprised when she heard it. Yo-Yo's mother was the superstar Yun Shusha. Why hadn't Yo-Yo mentioned this before? When Qing'e reacted, she immediately realized that now was not the time to think about this. She glared at Li Xiqing, suppressed her anger, and said to him, "Come down quickly. It's dangerous to stand so high up. What if she fell? Also, this notebook contains my private information. You can't read it. Give the book back to me immediately. Otherwise, what will you do? Are you going to tell your dean's mother?" Li Xiqing snorted coldly. "What else can you do besides snitching? Also, you don't have to pretend to care about me. Why should I listen to you? Let me tell you, many people in the class don't like you as a class committee member. You're the only one who thinks too highly of yourself. You have no right to order me to do anything. At home, my parents have never ordered me to do anything. What right do you have to be so fierce to me?" Qing'e finally cried out of anger. She bit her lip hard and tears fell drop by drop, but she did not know what to do. She squatted on the floor sadly and covered her face as she cried bitterly. For a moment, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect that things would turn out like this. Seeing Qing'e crying, they didn't know what to do for a moment. Yo-Yo and Xiao Chen had just entered the classroom when they saw this scene. Xiao Chen saw Li Xiqing standing on the podium with a notebook in his hand. Qing'e was squatting by the side, crying sadly. He did not know what was going on. Chapter 40. Xiao Chen frowned and asked, "What's going on?" It had to be said that Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo had WeChat accounts in class. Their WeChat accounts were even higher than those of any of the teachers. As soon as Xiao Chen spoke, Li Xiqing immediately replied obediently, "Yo-Yo, Chen, you came at the right time. Guess what I found?" Xiao Chen glanced at him and said unhappily, "Get down from the podium." "Oh." Li Xiqing listened to Xiao Chen's words and jumped down from the podium obediently. He went up to them and presented Qing'e's notebook in front of them as if he was presenting a treasure. "Can you guys guess what this is?" Gong Fan was not interested. Xiao Chen looked at Qing'e, who was squatting and crying, and vaguely felt that Li Xiqing was the one who made her cry. What's going on? Why is Qing'e crying? At the side, a boy mustered up his courage and said. Li Xiqing peeked at Qing'e's notebook. "There's a love letter written by Qing'e to Yo-Yo." Qing'e saw it and was so angry that she cried. Li Xiqing glared at them and said, "Do I need you to speak?" Gong Fan heard this and frowned. He looked at Qing'e with a complicated expression but did not say anything. However, he did not look too good. Li Xiqing saw that Gong Fan's expression was not good and guessed that he must be angry. However, he was confused. Why was he angry? Li Xiqing had to admit that he was very good at reading people's expressions. Therefore, he could tell that Gong Fan did not look good. He must be angry. However, he did not know why he was angry. However, he restrained himself a lot. Xiao Chen said expressionlessly, "Stop fooling around. Return the notebook to Qing'e." Li Xiqing heard this and even though he was unwilling, he did not dare to go against Xiao Chen's wishes. Although Xiao Chen usually looked carefree, he had a lot of prestige among the boys. Between boys, even if they didn't advocate martial arts, fighting was inevitable. However, ever since Xiao Chen had started school, he had never lost a battle. Even when he fought with his seniors, he was a heaven-defying existence who could take on 10 people at once. Boys had a mindset of worshipping the strong. Therefore, Little Chen's popularity and prestige among the boys were extremely high. Li Xiqing was even more shrewd. Although he was young, he knew that Xiao Chen's family was much more powerful than his. Therefore, he knew that he could not afford to offend this child. At such a young age, he had learned to be snobbish from his father, who was a businessman. When Li Xiqing heard Xiao Chen's words, he didn't continue to make things difficult for Qing'e. He reluctantly walked over and returned the notebook to Qing'e. However, Qing'e did not raise her head. Instead, she covered her face with her hands. She was so sad that she started to cry. After being fooled around by Li Xiqing, she had lost all her face. Children also valued face, especially girls. They were very thin-skinned. After Li Xiqing's nonsense, they could not raise their heads to face their classmates. Li Xiqing felt a little helpless. Qing'e ignored him, and Li Xiqing could not do anything about it. Hence, he turned to look at Xiao Chen with an embarrassed expression. What should I do? She's ignoring me. What did you do? She's ignoring you. Xiao Chen said coldly. Did you bully her? Li Xiqing did not speak. As a boy, how could you bully a girl? That's too embarrassing. Xiao Chen especially disliked boys who bullied girls. Chapter 40-41. Li Xiqing couldn't help but feel a little guilty. He stammered, I didn't bully her. I just felt that it was a novelty, so. So you showed her the love letter? Xiao Chen's gaze turned even colder. Li Xiqing didn't say anything else and lowered his head guiltily. Gong Fan suddenly opened his hand and said, Give it to me. Li Xiqing was stunned for a moment. At first, he didn't understand what he meant. It was only when he saw his open palm that he understood that Gong Fan was asking for the notebook. Hence, he obediently handed the notebook over to him. Gong Fan put the notebook back on the table and walked to Qing'e's side. He leaned over slightly and held her arm. Get up, he said quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it was loud enough for her to hear clearly. However, Qing'e didn't want to get up and face him. Originally, writing a love letter was a more private matter. Now that it was publicized, it was extremely embarrassing. Now that the fact that she liked Yo-Yo was an open secret in class, she couldn't face her classmates anymore. Gong Fan saw that she was burying her head in the notebook. He frowned slightly and sighed. Liking someone isn't something to be embarrassed about. The moment he finished speaking, the people around him were stunned and a little surprised. Everyone knew that Gong Fan was speaking up for Qing'e when he said that. When Qing'e heard this, she was a little surprised. She finally lifted her head and looked at him pitifully with a pair of tear-stained eyes. She didn't know what to do. She didn't want this matter to trouble Yo-Yo because of her. She felt that it was all because of her that Yo-Yo was implicated. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a problem. It's going to be lunch break soon. Don't squat here. It was rare for Gong Fan's voice to be gentler. Go back to your seat. Okay. Qing'e stood up obediently and allowed him to help her back to her seat. At the side, a few girls who were enjoying the show couldn't help but feel a little disappointed when they saw this. They had wanted to watch the show and enjoy Qing'e's embarrassment. Now that Yo-Yo had stepped forward to defend her, they didn't feel good about it. He felt that Qing'e had profited from her misfortune. She had received special care from Yo-Yo. Their eyes were red with envy and jealousy. Qing'e returned to her seat and continued to lie down, not daring to raise her head. Gong Fan raised his head and said expressionlessly, No one is allowed to mention this matter in the future. Everyone present, just pretend that this matter never happened. Do you understand? Got it, yes. We will definitely keep it a secret. Everyone must keep this a secret for Qing'e. Everyone pretended to defend Qing'e and nodded their heads. Gong Fan returned to his seat and lay on the table for an afternoon nap. During the afternoon break, Xiao Chen called Li Xiqing over. Before class started, Li Xiqing followed behind Xiao Chen and came back dejectedly. He walked over to Qing'e's desk, lowered his head in guilt, and said without rhyme or reason, Qing'e, I'm sorry. Qing'e looked at him suspiciously. Just now, Chen lectured me harshly. I feel that the incident at noon, he lowered his voice so that only he and Qing'e could hear him. I went overboard with the incident at noon. I apologize to you. Qing'e was a little surprised. What? Chapter 40-42. What happened at noon? I went too far. I apologize to you. Qing'e was surprised. What, Li Xiqing, who had always been proud and arrogant, was actually apologizing to her. It was unbelievable. Seeing that Chinga was stunned, Li Xiqing was also embarrassed. He turned his face away awkwardly and said uneasily, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have joked about such things. I've thought about it seriously. Indeed, there's nothing wrong with liking someone. I made a mountain out of a molehill." Chinga was completely taken aback. She originally thought that she had heard wrongly. She didn't expect Li Xiqing to apologize again in such a serious manner. This time, Chinga felt a little embarrassed. She didn't know why, but whenever Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo said something, everyone in the class treated it like an imperial edict. They had said that the incident in the afternoon was not allowed to spread, so it really didn't spread. In fact, everyone who was present seemed to have tacitly agreed that the incident had never happened. Chinga pursed her lips and muttered, "Actually, it's nothing. I was very angry at that time. Now that you've apologized, I'm not angry anymore." Li Xiqing's eyes lit up when he heard this. "Does this mean that you're willing to forgive me?" "Yes. As long as you don't joke about such things in the future and don't do such dangerous things, everything will be fine." After a pause, she emphasized, "Oh yes, just pretend that you don't know that I like Yo-Yo." Li Xiqing was surprised when he heard this. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. "Did you take you're not good enough for Yo-Yo seriously? That's not what I meant. Actually, you don't have to think too much. There's nothing wrong with liking someone." "Yes, but you can't use this as an excuse to make liking someone a problem." Chinga sniffled and rubbed her red and swollen eyes. She put on a natural and graceful smile and said, "I admit that I like him. But I feel that my liking him will definitely become a problem for him. So, I've always kept it in my heart. I didn't expect everyone to know about it." Li Xiqing felt even more guilty when he heard this and lowered his head. Ever since the children in the class found out that Yo-Yo's mother was Yun Shusha, they were in an uproar. There were often children who ran excitedly to his and Xiao Chen's desks, rubbing their hands and begging, "Please, does your mommy know the FX youth group? I really like these 4 little brothers. Can you help me get their autographs? It doesn't matter if we don't have 4 people. I really like Hua Jin. I feel that he is very handsome. It would be great if my husband is Hua Jin in the future. I want to take a photo with Hua Jin. Can you help me beg your mommy? If I can have a photo with Hua Jin, I think I can brag about it for a year. Please, please." At night, before dinner, Xiao Chen leaned against the bar counter thoughtfully and watched as Yun Shusha busied herself. After frowning for a long time, he finally spoke. "Mommy." "Yes." Yun Shusha finally looked up and glanced at him. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "What's the matter? Is Uncle Hua Jin very popular now?" "Yes, very popular." "Why?" Chapter 40-43. Yun Shusha stared at the oven as she said, "Uncle Hua Jin's career is at its peak now. Although his popularity could not be compared to when Jiyu Xingze was at his peak, it was not far off. No wonder. So many of his classmates were asking him for autographs and photos. Uncle Hua Jin is really popular these days." Yun Shusha thought for a moment and said, "Maybe it has something to do with the drama that he's been filming recently. The drama that he filmed last year is called Stargazing. Isn't it one of the top shows in the ratings? I heard that he's been running around so much these past few days." As she said this, Yun Shusha was suddenly curious. Xiao Chen usually did not have the time or energy to care about Hua Jin. Why was he suddenly asking about Hua Jin? "Many of my classmates are asking me for autographs." Yun Shusha was a little surprised when she heard this. "Why are they asking you for autographs?" "That's because one of my classmates seems to know that my dearest mommy is a superstar. Perhaps it was an accident, but he spread the news to the rest of the class. Now, everyone knows that you're my mommy, and I know Uncle Hua Jin." Yun Shusha's lips twitched when she heard this. Was Hua Jin really that popular? He was so popular that he was a primary school student. There are a total of 40 students in the class. Now, almost half of them are asking me for autographs. Should I give them to them? Yun Shusha thought for a moment and pursed her lips. If it's just an autograph, then it's not a big problem. She felt that being a celebrity was just an ordinary profession. Perhaps it was because of the popularity of the audience that made it so special. Hua Jin was indeed very popular. Almost everyone in the industry concluded that Hua Jin's role as an idol had already been set. Everyone agreed that he probably could only play roles in ancient costumes and could not act in modern idol dramas. However, this year, Hua Jin completely overturned everyone's understanding of him with two teen idol dramas, one Blossoming Half Summer and the other Starry Day. Hua Jin was already in his 20s. Even though he was wearing a school uniform, he didn't feel awkward at all. Especially since Blossoming Half Summer was an idol drama that spanned from the campus to the city's shopping mall. The male lead was played by Hua Jin from his youth to his middle age. There wasn't any sense of awkwardness. It was hard to believe that the #1 actor in costume dramas was actually more popular than costume dramas. A total of 25 autographed photos. Xiao Ichen counted with his fingers and then said to Yoon Shusha, "Mommy, ask Uncle Hua Jin for me. You can call him yourself. It's not like my classmate asked me for it," Yoon Shusha said. Xiao Ichen opened his mouth and wanted to refute, but he didn't know what to say. All right. He gave in. Sitting in the study room, Xiao Ichen dialed Hua Jin's number. After a long time, the call finally got through. "Hello. Uncle Hua Jin, it's me." Ahem. Xiao Ichen cleared his throat awkwardly. His face was a little red. Hua Jin was a little surprised when he heard Xiao Ichen's voice. "Hey. Why did you think of calling me? Can I ask you for a favor?" What is it?" "Can you give me 25 autographed photos?" Hua Jin was stunned when he heard this. Chapter 40-44. "Because, when my classmates found out that I knew you, they all asked me to do it. They said that they are your fans." "I see." Hua Jin pondered for a moment. "It's easy to get an autograph, but I won't be free for the next few days. Why don't you wait for me to take a break in a few days and I'll give you an autograph?" "Okay, that's good too." Xiao Ichen was touched. "Thank you, Uncle Hua Jin." Hua Jin was touched. Xiao Ichen and Hua Jin were not close. In fact, Hua Jin liked Xiao Ichen and Yo-Yo a lot. However, these two rascals were not close to anyone other than Yoon Shusha. He had been worried that he could not find a chance to suck up to them. Wasn't this a good time to suck up to them? He did not expect that Xiao Ichen would say thank you to him in such a sweet voice. Hua Jin suddenly realized that his chance to suck up to them had finally come. Unfortunately, his schedule was quite full these few days. Hence, Hua Jin promised Xiao Ichen that he would send over the autograph as soon as he was on break. Xiao Ichen was not in a hurry. However, Xiao Ichen's classmates thought that Xiao Ichen had forgotten about the autograph after so many days. Hence, they urged him a few times. Xiao Ichen explained to them that Hua Jin's schedule was too full. He would send over the autograph in a few days when he was free. Hence, they waited patiently for a while. However, after waiting for a long time, some of them started to complain. "Is it real or not? Didn't Li Xiqing say that Xiao Ichen's mother is a celebrity? Why does it seem so difficult to get an autograph? Could it be that the autograph is fake? After all, it's weird for him to agree to more than 20 autographed photos at once. Actually, it's normal for celebrities to not know each other. Perhaps Xiao Ichen's mother doesn't have a good relationship with Hua Jin? Hey, wasn't Xiao Ichen's mother Yoon Shusha? I know her. She and Hua Jin acted in a TV series called Lethal Beauty. Have you seen it? Xiao Ichen's mother played a bad woman in the drama. I hated her to death when I was watching the drama. I couldn't wait for her to die. You can't let Xiao Ichen hear that. I'm talking about the characters in the TV series. It's not like it's him. Even so, we can't let Xiao Ichen hear about it. He'll get angry. Yeah. It seems like he's always very serious about his family. He won't even joke about it. After waiting for a few more days, Hua Jin went on leave just as most of them were about to forget about it. He had been planning how to give Xiao Ichen and Yo-Yo a surprise. In the end, Xiao Ichen and Yo-Yo were completely shocked. That afternoon, during a self-study session, someone suddenly screamed, "It's Hua Jin." Wow! It's really Hua Jin. Soon, the entire classroom was in an uproar. Xiao Chen, who was already dozing off, was suddenly awakened by an earth-shattering scream. What the hell? Was it an earthquake? Chapter 40-45. There was a crowd of children in the classroom. Hua Jin was looking for Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo through the window. When he finally found them, he smiled and waved at them. Gong Fan turned around with a cold expression and pretended not to see them. Xiao Chen, on the other hand, was shocked. It was Hua Jin. When he was dozing off just now, he suddenly felt as though there was an earthquake in the classroom. There was a huge commotion and he vaguely heard Hua Jin being at home. He wondered what was going on, but it turned out that Hua Jin was actually here. He came directly to the school in person. Was he crazy? Xiao Chen had a look of disbelief on his face. Rather than saying that he was shocked, it was more appropriate to say that he was horrified. Was he crazy? Hua Jin, on the other hand, did not seem to be aware of his horror. Instead, he waved the autographed photos in his hand as though they were treasures. He smiled at Xiao Chen through the window and said, "I brought the autographed photos over." Xiao Chen held his forehead helplessly. He actually came all the way to the school just to give a few autographed photos. This was simply too crazy. Xiao Chen stood up helplessly and walked out of the classroom. Hua Jin immediately came up to him and handed him a thick stack of autographed photos. The reason why he said it was a thick stack was because Hua Jin did not give him photos, but handwritten photos. Autographed. Set. Where are the photos that you promised? Hua Jin said proudly, "These are all limited edition photo albums. You can't buy them normally. I hoarded them and prepared them as gifts for my fans. I've offered them to you. Are you still not satisfied?" He talked non-stop. After a pause, Hua Jin lowered his voice and said angrily, "Besides, how shameful would it be to give them photos? Wouldn't they secretly say that you're petty?" Xiao Chen rolled his eyes. "It's already troublesome to help them. Why do they have to ask for this and that? Isn't it fine if it's just a signed photo?" Hua Jin shook his head and sighed. "Since they're all my little fans, then I'll just treat it as me giving my fans some benefit." Xiao Chen raised his eyebrows. "All right. By the way, how did you get in here? No one stopped you?" As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something. "Also, you raided my school. What are you trying to do? I have a surprise for you." "Haha, there's no joy." Xiao Chen glanced at him. "Our school is heavily guarded and outsiders are not allowed to enter. How did you get in?" When Hua Jin heard this, he was a little surprised. "Is that so? Actually, I didn't want to come in. I wanted to call you at the school gate and ask my assistant to bring it in. In the end, when I reached the entrance, the security guard recognized me. Then, the principal who was on duty at the school gate welcomed me in." As he spoke, Hua Jin pointed behind him. Xiao Chen looked in the direction he was pointing at. He saw the purchasing teacher, a few deans from the education department, the vice principal, and the security guard standing behind Hua Jin excitedly. They were all smiling politely. Where was the moral integrity that was promised? Was the disciplinary teacher who was staring at Hua Jin with a smitten smile really the strict teacher who always preached that nothing can be accomplished without rules? Little Chen swallowed his saliva. When Hua Jin saw that Little Chen was staring at a teacher, he immediately said, "This teacher seems to be a fan of mine, too. Unfortunately, I only brought so many autographed photo albums with me. I couldn't give her a set, so she asked me for a group photo." Chapter 40-46. Xiao Chen looked as if she had seen a ghost. "She's your fan?" It was hard to imagine. The strict discipline teacher in her impression was actually Hua Jin's fan. Recently, Hua Jin's dramas had become very popular. Therefore, many people had become Hua Jin's fans. "Hua Jin, are you here to pick up Xiao Chen from school?" the discipline teacher asked cautiously. Hua Jin nodded. "Yes, school should be over soon. I'm waiting to pick up the two of them and go home together." The discipline teacher hummed in acknowledgement and looked at Little Chen enviously. She envied Xiao Chen for being able to interact so intimately with Hua Jin. She even had her idol personally pick her up from school. She wished she could become Xiao Chen. Even if it was just for a moment, she would be happy. Gong Fan sat in the classroom and yawned. He leaned on the table and ignored what was happening outside the window. It was as if Hua Jin's appearance had nothing to do with him. The children in the classroom were in an uproar. They all got up and ran to the window and door. When the discipline teacher saw this, she immediately stormed into the classroom and said sternly, "Focus on your self-study. Don't look around." "Wow, that's too much. We're acting like a diehard fan in front of Hua Jin. What's wrong with us looking around?" Many students lowered their voices and muttered unhappily. After the discipline teacher left, a group of people looked out of the window curiously. Many of the children were amazed by Hua Jin's good looks. "Wow, I didn't expect him to be better looking in real life than on TV. Don't many people say that celebrities don't look as good in real life as they do on TV? I think Hua Jin looks really handsome in real life. He's really handsome." Hua Jin was much more handsome in real life than on TV. Although Hua Jin didn't want to admit this, he really didn't look good on camera. In fact, his face looked chubbier in TV. In real life, Hua Jin's beauty was undeniable. Celebrities and ordinary people were really different. Hua Jin stood outside the corridor. Although he was only wearing ordinary clothes and a cap, it could not hide his shining physique. Not long after, Hua Jin and the class teacher walked in. Then, according to the name list that Xiao Chen had given them, they handed out autographs and photos to the children. The classroom was in an uproar. Round after round of exclamations rose and fell. After school, Hua Jin waited at the classroom door for Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo to pack their bags. He told his assistant to wait outside the school gate, but the assistant was worried that a public figure like him standing in the corridor would cause a commotion and congestion when parents came to the classroom to wait for their children to finish school. Hua Jin, on the other hand, felt that with such a large group of people surrounding him, it would only attract more attention. So, Hua Jin sent his bodyguard and assistant away and waited outside the door alone. Not long after, the parents who came to pick their children up from school also arrived. Just as the assistant was worried, Hua Jin was indeed dressed casually, but it couldn't hide his shining aura at all. However, many people were only suspicious and didn't take it to heart. Still, some people recognized him. "Is that Li Ziyu? That's impossible. Why would Li Ziyu come here?" Chapter 40-47. That's true. He's a superstar. Why would he come to a primary school? Everyone heard this. That's true. Hence, they didn't take it to heart. Hua Jin stood quietly among the group of parents until Xiao Chen and Yo-Yo walked out of the classroom with Hua Jin. The other children walked out and told their parents in surprise that the person who had been waiting at the classroom entrance was Hua Jin. All the parents were shocked. So it really was Hua Jin. However, a few teachers immediately rushed over and instructed the parents not to spread the news of Hua Jin entering and exiting the school. Otherwise, if the media were to find out about it, they would definitely fabricate reports about it and spread rumors about it. The three of them arrived at the school gate one after another. However, they suddenly saw a raptor parked at the school gate. It was such a big car that it was almost the most eye-catching car at the school gate. Hua Jin glanced over and saw Gong Jie leaning against the raptor. He was so shocked that his eyes widened. Gong Jie. D***MN. Why was he here? Xiao Chen was surprised to see Gong Jie. However, he immediately remembered and said, "Oh, I remember now. Uncle said that he would pick us up from school today." Hua Jin frowned and asked, "Eh? Didn't the chauffeur pick you up? Something happened at the chauffeur's house today. I heard that his wife had an accident and was hospitalized. He had to take care of her at the hospital. Because it happened so suddenly, he asked Uncle to pick us up." When Hua Jin heard this, he broke out in a cold sweat and immediately said, "Let's pretend that we didn't see him. Let's go." Xiao Chen's lips twitched when he heard this. He was a little embarrassed and said, "Is that really okay? If Uncle didn't see us, he would be very angry." Gong Fan raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. Xiao Chen was a little worried. Uncle can be very scary when he gets angry. Hua Jin was speechless. He pondered for a moment and then said quietly, "How about this? I'll leave first. You can follow him home, okay? Xiao Chen was about to nod when he stared blankly behind him with a horrified expression. Hua Jin saw his horrified expression and didn't react at first. He turned around abruptly and almost bumped into Gong Jie's chest. Hua Jin was speechless. He slowly raised his head and saw Gong Jie looking at him condescendingly with a cold smile on his face. Hua Jin was not short. At 1.8 meters, he was considered very tall, but Gong Jie was 8 to 9 centimeters taller than him. Don't underestimate this height. It was enough for Hua Jin to look up to him. Damn it, did he have to be so tall? When Hua Jin saw him, he greeted him awkwardly. You. What a coincidence. Haha. He laughed awkwardly and rubbed his hands. He was obviously very guilty. His lips curled into a lukewarm smile as he retorted, "Who's the one who wants to leave quietly? Why? Did you see a ghost?" Hua Jin shook his head in horror. No. The corners of Gong Jie's lips curled upward, and the fear in Hua Jin's eyes intensified. Why did he have to stare at him with such a terrifying expression? Well, I have something to do. I'll leave first. Hua Jin shrunk his neck and was about to escape when Gong Jie raised his hand and grabbed him by the back of his collar. Chapter 40-48. Gong Jie sat in the driver's seat and adjusted the rearview mirror. Hua Jin's pale face was reflected in the mirror. He didn't know why, but he felt as though he had been scared silly and was dumbstruck. Looking at his soulless and empty eyes, Gong Jie suddenly felt like laughing, but he held it back and snorted nonchalantly. Hua Jin shivered again. Gong Jie gave him a meaningful glance and put on his seatbelt as though nothing had happened. Gong Fan sat in the front passenger seat. When he got into the car, he crossed his arms and looked calm. Hua Jin felt as though he was in an icehouse filled with despair. Who's going to save him? Hua Jin gulped and asked carefully, "Where are we going?" Gong Jie asked him back expressionlessly, "Where do you want to go?" Hua Jin said weakly, "Actually, I have something to do tonight. Walking around. Why are you so afraid of me? I'm not going to eat you up." Hua Jin frowned, but he sighed in his heart. How infuriating. He also felt that it was very strange. He didn't know why, but Gong Jie had left a very deep and terrifying impression on him. He felt that he was a super dangerous person. However, Hua Jin also knew that no matter how much Gong Jie disliked him, he wouldn't do anything to him. He wouldn't kill him or eat him up, but his fear of Gong Jie was instinctive. Instinctive fear. Gong Jie said coldly, "I'm not going to eat you up. You don't have to be so afraid of me." He sized up Hua Jin through the rearview mirror, and Hua Jin could also size up Gong Jie through the rearview mirror. Gong Jie didn't know why, but even though he was smiling, he felt as though a layer of ice had formed on his face. He realized that Gong Jie and Gong Fan were indeed uncle and nephew. Regardless of whether he was happy or unhappy, he always acted like he was unapproachable to outsiders. But, even when he was angry, he still looked gentle in front of Yun Shusha. He couldn't be more envious. In this world, perhaps only Yun Shusha could enjoy such a privilege. Originally, the atmosphere between Hua Jin and Xiao Chen was very harmonious. However, ever since they got into Gong Jie's car, both of them were as quiet as chickens. Although Xiao Chen and the Gong Jie seemed to be getting along well, in reality, Xiao Chen was also relatively quiet in front of the Gong Jie. He did not dare to speak carelessly, because Gong Jie would scold him. Gong Jie's mouth was also very vicious. He was almost on par with Yo-Yo, and he hit the nail on the head. He still remembered that Xiao Chen had drawn a picture and showed it to Yun Shusha as though he was presenting a treasure. Gong Jie happened to be beside them, and he quietly said, "Is this a scribble?" Xiao Chen's entire being withered. How could they bully him like this? Moreover, the uncle and nephew were ganging up to bully him. Gong Jie even said that Xiao Chen's genes must have mutated. Otherwise, how could Yo-Yo be so stupid when Xiao Chen was so smart? However, fortunately, Mu Yaja was on Xiao Chen's side. He casually said, "Why don't you say that Yo-Yo's genes have mutated? His IQ is already considered heaven-defying for a child his age." Although this sentence didn't carry much weight. But, at least he had his daddy's support. It could be said that the family was divided into two factions. Mu Yaja and Xiao Chen, Hua Jin, Yo-Yo and Gong Jie. Yoon Shusha was in the middle. At that moment, they happened to pass by the intersection of the street. Chapter 40-49. Gong Jie immediately stopped the car and instructed Xiao Chen, "Sit here obediently. Uncle will buy it for you." After a pause, he glanced at Gong Fan. "Do you want some?" Gong Fan's face was full of disdain. "No." "Then what do you want to drink?" "Wolfberry tea." Gong Jie mocked, "Are you a Buddhist primary school student? You're so young and you're already so concerned about your health. I don't like things that are too sweet." Hua Jin muttered curiously, "That can't be. Doesn't Yo-Yo like sweet things?" In the past, Yo-Yo especially liked to drink cola. Other than cola, she also loved other sweets. However, Gong Fan was different. He only drank cola and politely declined other sweets. Gong Jie looked at Hua Jin again. "What about you? Are you treating me to a drink?" Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and was a little displeased. "What else?" "You." "No. There are too many people." Gong Jie didn't say anything and only instructed him to take care of the two children. The car door closed with a bang, leaving Hua Jin and Xiao Chen looking at each other. Gong Fan said, "Why does it feel like a husband asking his wife to take care of the children?" When Hua Jin heard this, his face turned red with anger. "Hey, don't spout nonsense." Gong Fan said, "I'm just spouting nonsense. Why are you so agitated?" Hua Jin was speechless. When Xiao Chen heard this, he held back his laughter the entire time. His shoulders shook as he secretly laughed. After hearing what Gong Fan said, he also realized that it was true. From the looks of it, his uncle was really like a husband who went out to work, and Hua Jin was like a stay-at-home wife who stayed at home to take care of the children. When he thought about it, it really did look like it. Xiao Chen covered his mouth and snickered. Hua Jin complained, "What are you laughing at?" Now that he says it like that, it's quite vivid. Little Chen put on a serious face. "Seriously speaking, have you considered my uncle's offer? He's so handsome and rich. If you follow him, you can be at ease and be the Gong madam." Hua Jin looked at him with disdain. "Are you trying to sell me out? I'm betraying my uncle. Speak of the devil." When Gong Jie returned with the milk tea and opened the car door, Xiao Chen was stunned. "Uncle. You. How are you so fast?" This was the entrance of the bustling city, a street full of delicacies. Usually at this time, there would be a long queue in front of the milk tea shop. It had only been a few minutes, and he had already bought it back. Gong Jie frowned. "Is that so? I said I was in a hurry, and the group moved aside." Xiao Chen couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Did you threaten them?" "No." Gong Fan said coldly, even if he didn't threaten them, just a glance was enough to scare them out of their wits. Gong Jie passed the goji berry tea to Yo-Yo and the pudding milk tea to Xiao Chen. When Hua Jin took the remaining cup, he was surprised to find that it was his favorite matcha flavor. He didn't tell Gong Jie that he liked the matcha flavor. Instead, he said it was up to him. Gong Jie also bought it casually. "What's wrong? You don't like this flavor?" Hua Jin was stunned and immediately replied, "No, I like this flavor." "Did you buy it casually?" Gong Jie was taken aback as well, and his brows furrowed slightly. At the side, Gong Fan interrupted, "Uncle also loves matcha flavor the most." Hua Jin was surprised. "You like the matcha flavor too?" "Yes." Chapter 40-50. Hugging the matcha milk cap, Hua Jin sucked a mouthful of the milk through the straw, feeling completely satisfied. Gong Fan took a sip of wolfberry tea and frowned. He put it aside and stopped drinking. Gong Jie was surprised to see this. "What's wrong? There seems to be a lot of saccharine." After a pause, Gong Fan said, "It's too sweet." Gong Jie was surprised when he heard this. His gaze became more complicated. "I recently took over a patient with multiple personality disorder." Gong Jie sat on the sofa while Alice sat opposite him. She poured tea for him and said calmly, "This patient has a total of 6 personalities and each of them is independent. Have you started to study this field? If it weren't for your dear nephew, I wouldn't have taken over this patient." Alice sat down and let out a heavy sigh. In the world, there aren't many patients with multiple personality disorder. The proportion of people with dual personality disorder is also very small. However, most of the more complicated conditions are handled by authoritative research institutions. In short, they are test subjects. These patients have been tortured by multiple personality disorder for a long time and have been controlled. Generally, the root cause of multiple personality disorder is because of self-identity disorder. They lose their sense of self-unity and split into two or more different personalities. When one personality appears, the other personalities will automatically withdraw. Generally speaking, the main personality has the advantage. As far as I know, the one with the most classifications in the world is Billy Milliken. Billy? Yes, his story was even filmed into a movie. Back then, he committed the crime of rape in Ohio State University. However, he was diagnosed with a rare case of multiple personality disorder because he was acquitted. Gong Jie nodded. I've heard of this person. This person was the only felon in the history of Country M who was exempted from punishment because of multiple personality disorder. After he committed the crime and was arrested, he didn't know what kind of crime he had committed. He underwent a psychological evaluation and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Alice took a sip of tea and continued, after he was exempted from punishment, he began to undergo a long period of treatment. 2 doctors discovered that he had a total of 24 personalities. However, through treatment, the doctor found that these personality splits are inseparable from his childhood. What do you mean? Billy's mother, Dorothy, grew up on a farm in Ohio. When she grew up, she lived with her husband, Dick. After they divorced, Dorothy moved to Miami and became a singer. There, she lived with a married comedian named Morrison. Dorothy and Morrison had 3 children. Their second son, William, was Billy. After that, a few years later, Morrison died of suicide. Previously, because of gambling debts and alcoholism, he had also committed suicide. After that, Dorothy left Miami with the child and returned to Ohio. Dorothy met Carmo. This man, Carmo, is the key to Billy's schizophrenia. Chapter 4051. Carmo had 2 daughters, one of whom was the same age as Billy. After Dorothy and Carmo got married, Carmo abused Billy for a long time, including raping him. Before that, because of his father's suicide and his mother's multiple remarriages, Billy already had multiple dissociative personalities. His first split personality was a little girl, Christine, when she was 3 years old. Alice had carefully studied Billy's 24 personalities. Among them, the core personality was Billy. He was 26 years old and had brown hair. The second personality, Arthur, was 22 years old and was British. He was rational and cold. He studied physics, chemistry, and medicine by himself. He could even speak Arabic fluently. He was stubborn and conservative and thought of himself as a capitalist. He was the first person to discover the existence of the other personalities. He was in charge of management and decided who would appear to represent the family. He wore glasses. He could speak Arabic. Yes. Gong Jie was baffled by her words. How could different personalities even have different nationalities? Humans were really mysterious creatures. Gong Jie did not know that there were multiple personalities in the past. So far, many strange incidents have been discovered. Some people, who were originally masochistic when they woke up, started to speak authentic Spanish for no reason. After diagnosis, they were also split personalities. Gong Jie finally understood what was going on. In other words, these personalities are all independent entities. The world where personalities exist is unimaginable to us ordinary people. The information we have is also from the oral accounts of the patients. For example, Billy had a split personality when he was 3 years old. When he was 3 years old, he was often called to a corner by the teacher to develop. She was an English little girl. She was smart but suffered from dyslexia. She liked to draw flowers and butterflies. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. These personalities were also oral accounts of the patients. Alice said, "This is the most special thing about Billy. The 24 personalities all liked to draw. These portraits were all drawn by Billy." Gong Jie still felt that it was a little unbelievable. Among so many personalities, There was a personality called Philip. He was 20 years old and had a rough personality. He was from New York and had a strong Brooklyn accent. There was also a personality called Kevin. He was 20 years old and good at scheming. He once planned the robbery of Gray's pharmacy. He liked to write and had blonde hair. In other words, Gong Jie concluded, these 24 personalities were all different. Some were little girls, some were rough men, and some were gentle writers. The 24 personalities each had their own roles and played different roles. However, the outside world could not tell. Only Billy himself knew. Yes. Will there be hallucinations? Alice stared into his eyes carefully and said slowly, how scary is it when dual personalities and multiple personalities act up? Let's make an analogy and hypothesis. When you are driving, you suddenly realize that you can't remember what happened on the way, or part of it. When you listen to someone talk, you suddenly realize that you can't hear a part or all of what he said. Persistent, severe headache, especially after the above two conditions appear. I found myself somewhere, but I don't know how I got here. Chapter 4052. Persistent, severe headaches, especially after the above two conditions appear. You realize that you are somewhere, but you don't know how you got here. You realize that you are wearing unfamiliar clothes, but you don't know how you put them on. Sometimes, you feel that the people, objects, or the world around you are not real. You feel as if you are standing next to yourself and watching yourself do something, or you are watching yourself as if you are observing another person. You face the mirror, but you realize that the person in the mirror is not looking at you, or you don't know yourself. You feel that you are in a familiar place, but you realize that you are very unfamiliar or unfamiliar with it. You are so focused on a fantasy or daydream that you feel as if it is really happening to you. When you are alone, you talk to yourself loudly. You realize that you can't remember if you have done something before. Sometimes, you realize that you are observing the world through a layer of fog. People and objects are very far away from you, and you can't see them clearly. Alice rattled off one item after another. Every one of them was enough to make Gong Jie tremble in fear. Multiple personality disorder was such a terrifying world. Gong Jie's expression could not help but become a little solemn. Is it very difficult to treat? It's very difficult, but it's not impossible. Alice continued, more than 10 years ago, there was a patient with multiple personality disorder in Lima. This patient had a total of 10 personalities, and 3 of them were very brutal and very disobedient. Therefore, the hospital prepared a very cruel electric shock treatment for this disobedient patient. Electric shock. Gong Jie was shocked when he heard that. Isn't that, it's very painful. Alice faced him. In Lima, Billy also received such painful treatment. After the electric shock, Billy was locked up in the most heavily guarded Ward 9. Most of the personalities gave up hope of living and focused on entering the land of death. The land of death. Yes. Once they enter the land of death, these personalities will be cruelly killed, which means that they will sleep forever. However, it is not ruled out that they will wake up again. However, among the 24 personalities, a teacher appeared and took over the body. He was the sum of the 23 personalities, and he had the memories and abilities of all of them. He was unwilling to bow his head to Lima and refused to admit defeat with his death. He wanted to resist and announce Lima's tyranny to the world. He wanted to completely destroy this hell. After that, this personality used his brilliant acting skills and communication skills to convince Lima that he had become obedient enough. Hence, he was transferred from the strictest room, Room 9, to the most relaxed room, Room 6. Among them, one of the personas wanted to kill the doctor who took over him, but he was stopped by the teacher. This persona of the teacher was the cleverest of the personas. He started to collect evidence of the hospital's illegal activities. Without a pen and paper, he pulled out a cotton ball from inside his blanket. He wet it and started to write under the bed. He stole his ward mate's tape recorder and stuck it into the toilet vent to record the contents of the medical team's meeting. With the evidence of overdose, he threatened to give him a pen, paper, and visitation rights immediately. This personality is really smart. Yes. Chapter 4053. When Gong Jie heard this, he seemed to be deep in thought. Alice changed the topic. I don't have many chances to come into contact with patients like Billy. After all, there are so many patients with multiple personalities. It's really rare. But recently, I got an opportunity to take over a patient. What kind of patient is she? An 18-year-old girl named Lucy. Lucy? She's an English woman who grew up in New York. I've been treating her for 2 months. Then, I found out that her split personality is also related to her childhood. When Gong Jie heard this, he kept quiet and listened carefully to Alice's analysis. 3 years ago, she was sentenced to 80 years in prison because she killed 3 students. However, after the diagnosis, the lawyer overturned the conviction on the grounds that she was suffering from schizophrenia. But, the legal procedures are very strict. Now, the lawyer is still defending her innocence. When Alice talked about Lucy, she seemed to be interested. Actually, putting aside her unfortunate experience, I feel that she's the strangest patient I've ever taken over. To me, taking over such a patient makes me want to find out more. What kind of patient is she? Alice came up with a rough draft in her mind and said tirelessly. When Lucy was young, her mother went through 2 marriages. After that, she married a man who was 3 years older than her. She married him with Lucy. From then on, for 10 years, until she was 15 years old, this man had been abusing Lucy for a long period of time. He even sexually assaulted her. The crime she committed was that she murdered 3 seniors from the same school. After killing them one by one, she threw their bodies into the sea. When the case was in an endless loop, she suddenly turned herself in and said that she had murdered the 3 boys. However, when she turned herself in, she also accused the 3 boys of sexually assaulting her twin sister. However, after the police investigated and collected evidence, they found that her accusation was completely false. After checking her from all aspects and collecting evidence, there was no evidence to prove that the 3 boys had done anything to her twin sister. She had 2 cousins in total, and one of them said that such a thing had never happened. However, Lucy said that the 3 boys had violated her twin sister. But, in fact, she did not have a twin sister. Even so, she still insisted on what she said. Later, during the trial, her defense lawyer requested for a psychiatric evaluation. According to the procedure, after the evaluation, they found that she had multiple personalities. Chapter 4054. Later on, her childhood sweetheart, the detective, saw through this and persuaded her to turn herself in. But later on, she found out that these people did not exist at all. They were all her split personalities. These 3 boys did not do anything to her. However, not long after, a girl from the same school stood up and testified that she was the real victim of these 3 boys. At that time, Lucy was also at the scene. She probably saw this scene with her own eyes and it triggered the unbearable memories of her youth, which evolved into the final situation. In other words, these were all her fantasies. And during the unbearable torture of her youth, she kept splitting up those personalities. That twin sister was just her unfortunate reflection. She wanted to get rid of the unbearable trauma of her youth, so she wanted to forget all the pain and torture. But the more she tried to forget, the more depressed she felt. So, gradually, she split up a second personality to bear these painful memories. The more Alice said, the more uneasy Gong Jie felt. He had a feeling that Lucy's situation was inexplicably similar to Yo-Yo's. When I hypnotized Yo-Yo back then, I entered his memory and dug out a lot of painful memories from his memory. Presumably, Gong Fan's personality was Yo-Yo's split personality to bear the pain and unbearable memories. Gong Jie muttered to himself in shock. Gong Fan was actually Yo-Yo's split personality. Yes. So, Yo-Yo felt a lot of guilt towards Gong Fan. Because this personality was created by him to bear the pain. So, Gong Jie followed his words and said, so, Yo-Yo was unwilling to destroy him. Yes, Yo-Yo is very kind, really kind. After a pause, Alice continued, so, I've been thinking of a way. Yes. I once thought of creating a society with a personality to maintain order. Would this solve the problem? Gong Jie was a little worried when he heard this. You mean, you want to create a third personality or a fourth personality? Yes. No. Gong Jie's attitude was firm. If that's the case, a person's spirit won't be able to withstand it. Create more personalities to form a society of personalities. No, I won't agree. Alice's methods always frightened him. Indeed, this personality society was as shocking as the Sky Eye plan that Yo-Yo had proposed. Do you think I'd use Yo-Yo as a test subject? Alice laughed it off. No, I won't. I'm going to treat that girl now. If there are no accidents, I'll manage her personality and create a personality society. If this treatment plan works, maybe I can consider it. Gong Jie neither nodded nor denied. He just remained silent. He also wanted to take a gamble. That girl became your test subject. He's not a test subject. Alice shook her head and said, Do you know why she's in my hands? Why? Because everyone is at their wits' end. Chapter 4055. Speaking of electroconvulsive therapy, Gong Jie was a little curious and asked tentatively, What exactly is electroconvulsive therapy? Alice furrowed her brows and continued, Do you know why personalities exist? Why? Isn't it because the main personality created them? Alice nodded and said, Then do you know why it's so easy to create personalities but so difficult to eliminate them? I don't know. It's because there's almost no difference between the main personality and the secondary personality. Every personality can be seen as an independent entity. Then, since they're no different from ordinary people, and ordinary people don't want to die, why would a personality be willing to be destroyed so easily? Once they exist, once they're created, they'll be like ordinary people. They'll have 7 emotions and 6 desires, independent thoughts and selfishness, and even ambition. Then, gradually, these personalities will want to occupy the main personality. Therefore, it'll cause a lot of mental stress. Back then, Yo-Yo's main personality collapsed because of the intense conflict between the two personalities. So, Gong Jie sorted out some ideas. That's why it'll cause a lot of mental stress. That's right. Gong Jie gradually understood. In the past, he didn't understand what it was like to have multiple personalities. But after listening to Alice's explanation, he gradually gained a deeper understanding. But do you know why some people choose to commit suicide? Are they normal people? Yes. Because of pain. Alice's tone suddenly became heavier. Because of the indelible pain, whether it's mental or physical, there really is such a pain that makes people want to die. Gong Jie suddenly understood. Electroconvulsive therapy is to let these personalities experience the pain of being born as a human, so they choose to destroy themselves? Yes, bingo. Alice snapped her fingers and her eyes revealed a look of amazement. You seem to have a lot of potential. I don't want to have such a cruel potential. Gong Jie understood. Using electroconvulsive therapy to let each personality experience the pain of being born as a human, then these personalities would start to get tired of the feeling of being a human body. Then, they would choose to go to the land of death. However, the main personality will also suffer this terrible pain. Alice stared deeply into his eyes. Although this pain is also borne by the main personality, no matter how painful it is, it's not fatal. And you also know that the main personality will never die. The ones who die will only be the other personalities. Gong Jie suddenly felt a bone-chilling coldness. Why would they think of such a cruel treatment? Because they're at their wits' end. Alice sighed again. So, in this world, there are too many unknowns. The only people who truly understand the world of schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder are probably only themselves. The reason why the current medical industry had so much amazing information in this field was because most of it came from the oral accounts of these patients. We have no way of telling whether what they say is true or false. Everything in their world is foreign and unknown to us. Chapter 4056. After a long silence, Alice sighed from the bottom of her heart. I even want to create a second personality in order to cure Yo-Yo. At least, I can really explore his world and find the right medicine. Gong Jie was shocked when he heard this. Are you crazy? He had never heard of a doctor deliberately creating a second personality in order to treat a patient with schizophrenia. Is it strange? Aren't scientists all unreasonable lunatics? Gong Jie looked at her strangely. He had always known that Alice was a lunatic. She was a crazy woman. To ordinary people, she might be judged as a cruel woman. When she was sleepy during an autopsy, she would freely drink a bottle of red wine. In the middle of the night, she would study corpses in the morgue. The extent of her obsession with medicine was incomprehensible to ordinary people. In order to cure Yo-Yo, she did not hesitate to sacrifice herself. What a joke. Gongjie said, "You're really crazy." Alice, however, did not think much of it. Many professors who have created epic achievements have created so many medical miracles through countless experiments. Some experiments can be replaced by white mice. Some can be replaced by the voluntary donation of the deceased. However, under other circumstances, most scientists will sacrifice themselves and use themselves as experimental subjects. During the war, many experiments were conducted. Although it was cruel, it also contributed a lot of information to human medicine. That's because some diseases can't be cured without several experiments. So, Gongjie narrowed his eyes. How do you create dual personality? You have to know that not everyone can have dual personality and multiple personality disorder. Dual personality and multiple personality disorder are not ordinary people. However, before they created these personalities, they were actually ordinary people, right? Gongjie did not want to listen to her fallacious reasoning. Shut up. No matter what, don't mention this matter again in the future. Alice stared deeply into his eyes and sighed helplessly. Then I really don't know what to do. Gongjie did not say anything else. Uncle, what are you thinking about? At the dining table, Xiao Chen snapped his fingers when he saw that Gongjie was in a daze. Gongjie finally reacted. His eyes regained focus, and his ink-like pupils calmed down. Nothing, I was just daydreaming. On the way back to school from picking up Gong Fan and Xiao Chen, he suddenly recalled the things that Alice had mentioned to him at the headquarters. His thoughts were heavy all the way. Just like what Alice said, dual personality was really a terrible thing. Yo-Yo loved desserts so much, but when it came to Gong Fan, he politely declined all desserts. It was magical, but he also felt heartache. It felt close, but it also felt strange. Now, other than Yo-Yo and Gong Fan, everyone had fallen into a vicious cycle. That was, he hoped that Yo-Yo's dual personality would be cured and that Gong Fan's second personality would be preserved. Everyone hoped that Yo-Yo would be well, but no one wanted Gong Fan to leave. It was really a thorny problem. Gongjie propped his chin on his hand and gently took a sip of the red wine. Yun Shusha, who was beside him, sized him up silently. She, too, knew what was bothering him. It was probably because of Yo-Yo. Chapter 4057. It must be because of Yo-Yo. However, Gongjie did not take the initiative to mention it to her, so it was probably not very optimistic. Yun Shusha did not ask. Although she had been worried about Yo-Yo and Gong Fan, it was useless to worry blindly. She might as well let nature take its course and cherish the time she spent with Yo-Yo and Gong Fan. Shou Jie, don't let your imagination run wild. Eat a piece of steak. Gongjie came back to his senses and hummed in acknowledgement. Who cooked this steak? Me. Hey. Gongjie seemed to have discovered a new world. You know how to cook steak? Of course. Yun Shusha rolled her eyes. I should learn how to cook. Yo-Yo seems to have disappeared for 2 days. Gongjie asked again, where's Gong Fan? Yun Shusha said, he's finished eating. He's in the study. Oh. Gongjie suddenly recalled Alice's words. Actually, I've been thinking about how to coexist with 2 personalities. Do you know? If Gong Fan leaves Yo-Yo's body, he will definitely take away all those dark memories. However, the uneasiness and guilt will forever remain in Yo-Yo's heart. He has always felt that he owed Yo-Yo. His disappearance will cause Yo-Yo to completely break down. Was that really the case? Gongjie felt inexplicably frustrated. In the study, Gong Fan lay on the table and slept for a short while. When he opened his eyes again, they had regained their clarity. Yo-Yo raised his head and looked around. Just as he was about to get up, he suddenly noticed a blue notebook beside him. He raised his eyebrows inexplicably and looked around again. Seeing that he was alone in the study, he opened the notebook thoughtfully. When he woke up, he did not know where he was or what he should do. His memories seemed to have stopped 2 days ago. He knew nothing about what had happened to Gong Fan in the past 2 days. It was precisely because of this predicament that he was at a loss. He flipped open the notebook and saw that it was completely different from his, but he recognized Gong Fan's handwriting at a glance. It was written in red pen, clear and dazzling. In the future, we will use this method to contact each other. Yu Yu swept a glance at it, and his pink lips curled up slightly. He understood everything at a glance. It looked like a notepad, but it was more detailed than a notepad. The 1st of February, at night, lying in bed, I suddenly felt very uneasy. I felt like I was a burden, so I told Mommy about my uneasiness. She gave me a kiss and told me that I was an inseparable part of her. I was very happy. Although the words seemed cold, Yo-Yo could feel Gong Fan's suppressed joy from the words. The 2nd of February, today, Chinga seems to be more enthusiastic towards me than before. Is it because of your appearance? However, I'm not good at talking to girls. She probably thinks that I'm a little lonely and disappointed. In the afternoon, Li Sicheng published the love letter she wrote to you to the other classmates and made her cry. How troublesome. I don't know how to deal with such things. In the future, don't create such trouble for me. The wolfberry tea Gong Jie bought is too sweet. It tastes terrible. Xiao Chen thought that you were back, so he said bad things about me. Idiot. I feel inexplicably anxious and sleepy. I want to sleep, but I'm afraid that if I fall asleep, the one who wakes up won't be me. However, it's okay. At least there's still a place for me. Chapter 4058. Do you like to drink cola and milk tea? It's too troublesome. It's not good to eat too sweet. The more Yo-Yo read these words, the more he laughed. Gong Fan had such an adorable side to him. Could they communicate through the notepad? That was quite convenient. Why hadn't he thought of such a method before? Yo-Yo stretched lazily when the door suddenly opened. Little Ichen poked his head in. When Yu Yu saw that it was him, he suddenly thought of a naughty idea. His lips curled up wickedly as he pretended to be solemn, just like Gong Fan's aloof look. What's wrong? He imitated Gong Fan's cold tone. Sure enough, little Ichen believed him. He walked in with trepidation, cleared his throat, and said gently, "It's getting late, it's time to sleep. Have you made your bed?" "Yes, it's done." Little Ichen's eyes darted around. "I just finished showering, and I'm already fragrant." Yo-Yo stood up slowly and walked in front of Xiao Ichen. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Let me smell you." Xiao Ichen immediately stood up straight and opened his arms for him to smell. Yo-Yo had a serious obsession with cleanliness. Sometimes, when Xiao Ichen came home from school and finished his homework, he would let himself loose. He would either pester Gong Jie, Hua Jin, or Lisa to play tennis. When he came home at night, he would be drenched in sweat. Gong Fan and Yo-Yo were obsessed with cleanliness and despised him. Hence, they would urge him to take a shower every night and watch him apply body lotion before entering the room. As a result, little Ichen gradually developed the habit of bathing and showering every day. He even had the habit of applying body lotion after showering. He wasn't so particular in the past. It was all because of his younger brother. Xiao Ichen sized up Yo-Yo and felt that he was very obedient. Although they were the same person, they were still two separate personalities. No matter how they acted, they wouldn't look alike. He could not help but mutter strangely, "Are you really Gong Fan?" Yo-Yo found it funny, but she held it in. "Who do you think I am?" "I think you look like Yo-Yo." Xiao Ichen tapped his head, feeling a headache coming on. Yo-Yo and Gong Fan could not tell the difference. Sometimes, Gong Fan suddenly changed back. If he accidentally said something bad about Gong Fan, that would be terrible. "Ha, you found out." Yo-Yo couldn't be bothered to hide it. He didn't know why, but as long as he was in front of Gong Fan, Xiao Ichen would become unusually nervous. He couldn't bear to tease him. When Xiao Ichen heard this, he suddenly realized what was going on. "You're Yo-Yo." "Yes. You tricked me." Xiao Ichen complained pitifully. "How could you do that?" Yo-Yo laughed and patted his head. "All right, I won't tease you anymore. Don't be angry. Xiao Ichen crossed his arms in front of his chest, looking proud. He looked like he wanted to be comforted and hugged. Yo-Yo quickly reached out and hugged him. All right, brother, be good. Don't be angry. Xiao Ichen was satisfied when he heard this. He grunted. Don't do it again. Okay, I know. Oh yes, something happened this afternoon. Xiao Ichen was about to tell him about Chinga when Yo-Yo immediately reacted. Are you talking about Chinga? Hey. Xiao Ichen looked as if he had seen a ghost. How did you know? He was instantly alarmed. Yo-Yo couldn't have known. Could it be that he was Gong Fan? Chapter 4059. Alright, stop making wild guesses and don't bother about how I found out. Anyway, I'm clear about this matter. The way he communicated with Gong Fan was a secret. Even if it was Mommy, he wouldn't tell her. This was a secret that only belonged to them. Is Uncle around? Yes, he's on the balcony on the second floor. What's the matter? Yo-Yo said, you can go back to your room first. I have some matters to discuss with him. With that, Yo-Yo walked up to the second floor. When he reached the second floor, he bumped into Gong Jie, who was about to go downstairs. When Gong Jie saw him, he sized him up for a while until he could tell that he was Yo-Yo and not Yo-Yo. Then, he tried to greet him. Yo-Yo. Yes. Yo-Yo's eyes turned into crescents. Uncle is very smart to recognize me. He won't smile like you. Gong Jie paused and immediately corrected him. He doesn't like to smile much. Is that so? Gong Jie nodded. Actually, it was very easy to distinguish between the two personalities. Gong Fan's personality was cold and indifferent, and it emanated from his bones. On the other hand, Yo-Yo's warmth, even if it was just a look, could make people feel very warm from the bottom of their hearts. This kind of feeling couldn't be changed at all. It was just that in the past, he didn't realize it. He just found it strange. How could a child be so smart? He pretended to be so obedient in front of Yunshusha, but in fact, he was a terrifying child. He was very shrewd, but in front of her, he acted so innocent. It was just that back then, he didn't expect that Yo-Yo had a split personality. If he had noticed this, he would have handed Yo-Yo over to Alice immediately. It wouldn't have been delayed until now. Are you looking for me? Yes. Gong Jie was a little curious. Why are you looking for me? Gong Fan wants me to tell you that no matter what you buy for him next time, it has to be sweet. He doesn't like it if it's too sweet. That's all. Gong Jie broke out in cold sweat. Of course not. Yo-Yo walked to the railing of the balcony and leaned against it lazily. She enjoyed the night breeze and gently closed her eyes. Gong Jie walked behind him and looked at his back. After a while, he came to his side and leaned against the fence with him. Uncle and nephew, just like that, faced the night breeze. The wind at night was a little cold. Coupled with the drop in temperature at night, it occasionally became a little sharp. Gong Jie felt a little cold, so she asked, "Aren't you cold?" Yo-Yo shook her head and narrowed her eyes. She seemed to be enjoying herself. Gong Jie complained, "Did you run up here just to drag me along with you in the cold wind? There are many things that I want to tell you, but when I close my eyes, I suddenly forget them. You're not that old yet. How did your memory become so bad?" Yes, maybe I'm old. When Gong Jie heard this, he was dealt a huge blow. If you're old, then won't I be ascending? Isn't it good to be exposed to the cold wind? You'll be more awake when it's cold. Gong Jie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It's already so late. It's time to sleep, but you're telling me that you want to be more awake. I don't want to sleep. Yo-Yo was actually very sleepy, but he didn't want to waste any time on sleep. He wanted to be more awake. Even if he had to lean against the balcony to enjoy the cold wind and look at the night sky, it was better than closing his eyes. Chapter 4060. What kind of unorthodox saying is that? Yo-Yo smiled. Someone else said it. Gong Jie disagreed. Then have you heard of this saying? Go ahead. Gong Jie said, you can only live longer if you sleep early. You can easily die if you sleep late. Yo-Yo nodded. This saying is very pertinent and also very scientific. Gong Jie turned around and leaned against the fence. Suddenly, he asked seriously, Can Gong Fan hear what I'm saying now? He can't. In other words, no matter what I say to you, he won't hear it. Yo-Yo nodded. Of course. It's very strange. How is it strange? Gong Jie narrowed his eyes. He couldn't tell. In the past, you had dual personality, but the difference wasn't so obvious. Yo-Yo was stunned for a moment and quickly understood what he meant. In the past, his personality was controlled by me. Rather than saying that I controlled it, it was because I didn't realize his existence at all. When he appeared, I still had a vague memory. I also vaguely knew what he did and said. I was just curious why I couldn't control myself, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. I only knew that sometimes, I often couldn't control myself to do some things and say some things. I also know about that world-shaking Heaven's Eye project. Gong Jie nodded. Then why couldn't you control yourself in the end? Yo-Yo continued, Alice hypnotized me. She entered my hypnotic world and discovered my second personality. Actually, erasing my memory was just hypnotizing my first personality and sealing it. From then on, my second personality was completely out of control. I also tried to suppress it. However, it gradually got out of control. Gong Jie was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he asked with a serious expression, Actually, there is a treatment plan. Gong Fan is willing to sleep and go to the land of the dead. Are you willing to? I'm not willing. Yo-Yo interrupted him. Although it was an understatement, one could vaguely see that he was trembling. Gong Jie couldn't bear to see him like this. Actually, I used to hate him very much. However, later on, I realized that I was the one who created his birth. I forced all the memories related to pain onto him. Only then could I be at ease. He, on the other hand, has always been shouldering so much. He is also a part of me. Why do I have to destroy him? Gong Jie was still silent. Yu sized him up, and the light in his eyes dimmed. I know you're worried about me, thank you. Gong Jie ruffled his hair in disdain. Why are you being so courteous with me? You're not cute. Yo-Yo blushed and felt a little helpless. Do I have to think about something so far away now? Of course. Actually, it's not far away at all. Humans have 7 emotions and 6 desires. When you enter your teenage years and have feelings, it's inevitable that there will be a girl you like. If he doesn't like her and rejects her, what will you do? Yo-Yo obviously didn't take it to heart. It's hard for me to imagine liking someone. Do I have to live with my wife after getting married? What else? Chapter 4061. It's hard for me to imagine falling in love with someone. Do I have to live with my wife after I get married? What else? Gong Jie asked, do you want to stick to your mommy for the rest of your life? Yo-Yo hesitated for a moment before replying, if Daddy doesn't mind, he'll definitely mind. Who doesn't want to be alone? It was rare for Gong Jie to take Muyaja's side and think about it. Don't tell me you'll become a mommy's boy when you grow up. I don't know. Isn't a mommy's boy good? Mommy's boy is despised. If you act like this, it'll inevitably cause a fight between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Yo-Yo's lips twitched. Uncle, you're not even married yet. Why are you thinking about what will happen after I get married? Gong Jie snorted coldly and said disapprovingly, I'm just worried about you. Uncle, don't worry about me. It's better for you to worry about your own life. When Gong Jie heard this, he smiled indifferently. I think it's more comfortable to be alone. I'm not interested in women. Oh. When Yo-Yo heard this, he couldn't help but feel a little gossipy. So you're really into men? Gong Jie frowned and glanced at him. You seem to be very nosy about my love life. Get over it. Don't care about what the world thinks. Yo-Yo patted him on the shoulder like an old man and consoled him. Society is very open now. It's not uncommon for men to like men. Love is free. You can fall in love even if you're of the same gender. Gong Jie's eyelids twitched again. It was really hard to imagine that such words would come out of the mouth of a 10-year-old child. It felt very out of place. Gong Jie suddenly changed the topic. Alice recently took in a girl. Like you, she has multiple personality disorder. She's 18 years old. It's said that she plans to study this girl's illness and delve into this field. When Yo-Yo heard this, he was a little surprised. Multiple personality disorder? Yes. Can I see her? Gong Jie raised his eyebrows. Why do you want to see her? Can't I? Yo-Yo pouted, feeling wronged. Gong Jie couldn't persuade him. Okay, I'll take you there when you're on vacation. Yes. Yo-Yo paused and suddenly shushed Gong Jie mysteriously. Don't tell Gong Fan about this, in case he gets sensitive. Got it. The girl named Lucy mentioned by Alice was being held in Miami's Michelle Hospital. The reason why she was imprisoned was because there was a violent personality in Lucy's personality. Therefore, Lucy was once seen as a dangerous person and was heavily monitored, completely losing her personal freedom. Before Alice took over, Lucy was a patient of Professor Romanka. Professor Romanka was a textbook in the field of psychology and psychiatry. He was also an honorary professor at Michelle Hospital. His attainments in the field of psychiatry and psychology were regarded as authoritative. Lucy was being held in Michelle Hospital and was ordered to refuse all visits. If it weren't for her relationship with Alice, it would be impossible to see her. Before flying to Miami, Alice repeatedly warned Gong Jie not to reveal that Yo-Yo had multiple personality disorder when he met Professor Romanka. This guy is crazy. You have to be careful. Although Gong Jie didn't know why Alice warned him, he agreed unconditionally. Chapter 4062. Alice did not dare to divulge anything. She was afraid that it would be detrimental to Yo-Yo if it got out. However, when Gong Jie and Yo-Yo arrived at Michelle Hospital, for some reason, Yo-Yo felt his eyelids twitch violently when he got out of the car and saw the grand entrance of the hospital. He felt a little uneasy. This hospital gave him a very oppressive feeling. It was like a prison. Children were especially sensitive. Especially children like Yo-Yo. In short, this hospital left a bad first impression on him. He could not put his finger on it. He felt that this hospital was eerie. It's like a haunted house. Yo-Yo muttered. Gong Jie laughed when he heard that. Instead of calling it a hospital, it's more like Professor Romanka's private research center. Research center? Yo-Yo could not help but feel a chill run down his spine when he heard that. What does it research? Of course, it's research on people with multiple personality disorder like Lucy. This Professor Romanka, don't tell me he's experimenting on Lucy and those patients with multiple personality disorder. Anyway, according to Alice, Professor Romanka's methods are appalling. He was also the one who advocated electroconvulsive therapy. However, because it was too cruel and inhumane, it was banned. Yo-Yo suddenly sympathized with Lucy. They walked through a long corridor and could not see the end of it. There was a row of floor-to-ceiling windows with colorful church-style prints. It seemed to be related to the mysterious religion of Zong. For some reason, the bright colors were more oppressive than the black and white pictures. Yo-Yo held Gong Jie's hand tightly. He felt inexplicably uneasy. He was the one who suggested to take a look, but now he felt like retreating. Gong Jie sensed his uneasiness and held his hand tightly. The warmth of his palm gave him a sense of security. Are you afraid? Gong Jie was a little surprised. Yo-Yo nodded and then shook his head. He seemed a little conflicted. He kept turning his head and staring at the floor-to-ceiling window. Suddenly, Alice's words came from behind him. Don't stare at the window. Gong Jie and Yo-Yo were startled. They turned around and saw Alice in a white coat walking towards them. Don't stare at the patterns on the window, she said. Why? Yo-Yo was the first to question. Is there something wrong with the window? Alice smiled and asked, don't you feel uncomfortable staring at it? Yo-Yo was stunned. You must be asking me, how would I know? Yes. Indeed. Staring at the paintings on the glass, Yo-Yo did feel a little uncomfortable, even oppressed. Don't you think this scene is very familiar? Alice touched his head. Yo-Yo shook his head and pondered for a moment. It does feel very familiar, but I can't remember. It is said that this is a world drawn by one of Lucy's personalities. What do you mean? Alice explained. She said that these paintings are the scenes of the land of death. Yu was startled for a moment as he suddenly recalled it. No wonder he felt oppressed when he stared at these paintings. Chapter 4063. Does Lucy know how to draw? Yes, she knows how to draw. After Professor Romanka discovered this talent of hers, he nurtured her diligently and guided her to draw the world that is unknown to the world. Alice walked to his side and lowered her voice. You shouldn't have come to this place. Yo-Yo felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. He didn't know why, but his back was unknowingly covered in cold sweat. Alice said to Gongjie, I'll take you to the office first. Wait for me there for a while. I still have something to talk to Professor Romanka about. When I'm done with my work, I'll come and find you. Gongjie raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Alice sighed. Professor Romanka doesn't seem to be willing to let her go. Lucy? Yes. Alice nodded. He wants to continue his research on her and can't bear to give her to me. I'm still communicating with him. This old man always goes back on his words. What a headache. She brought Gongjie and Yo-Yo to a room and told them to stay in the room and not go anywhere. Yo-Yo sat down on the sofa and looked around. This was a very large room. There was a desk, 2 stools, a row of sofas, and a row of bookshelves. Other than that, there was no other decoration. Many abstract paintings were pasted on the snow-white walls. The colors were warm and made people feel comfortable. Gongjie looked at these paintings and suddenly said, once the patient enters this room, these paintings will start to give him a psychological suggestion. Psychological suggestion? Yes. Gongjie sat down on the sofa. Seeing that Yo-Yo had a strong desire to explore psychological suggestions, he said, someone did such an experiment. A death row prisoner was brought to a room and blindfolded. Then, his limbs were tightly bound. At this time, a doctor used a scalpel and made a shallow cut on his wrist. Blood flowed out. There was a basin beside his hand. Although it was bleeding, it wasn't fatal. However, the doctor opened the cap of the 4-drip bottle, and the water dripped down the tube into the basin drop by drop. At first, the prisoner on death row had a relaxed expression, but as time passed, he began to cry in pain. He began to struggle, and he began to fear death. He thought that the dripping sound was the sound of his blood draining away. He began to complain of a headache, vomiting, and his nerves were tense. And then, later on, he really died. Yo-Yo was speechless. How can that be? Scared to death? No. Parasympathetic rebound caused cardiac arrest. Gongjie continued, when the patient enters such a room and sees these paintings, they begin to be hypnotized and gradually let down their guard. So it's like that. Yo-Yo suddenly felt that doctors were very scary. Gongjie saw through his thoughts at a glance. Do you think it's scary? A little. That's right. Don't find a wife who studies medicine in the future. He was actually in the mood to make such a cold joke. Yo-Yo did not sit still. He stood up and walked around the ward. Then, he walked to the office desk and sat down on the leather chair. When he sat down, he vaguely saw a dark shadow under the desk. Yo-Yo looked at the edge of the bed and saw a snow-white shirt through the light. He was so shocked that he stood up immediately. When Gongjie saw this, he walked towards him vigilantly. Chapter 4064. He was so shocked that he stood up immediately. Under the table, there was a mass of dark shadows. It felt like a person was hiding under the table. Who's there? Yo-Yo stared at the shadow warily. When Gongjie saw this, he walked towards him warily. What's the matter? Yo-Yo said to him, someone's hiding under the table. Upon hearing this, Gongjie also became alert. He glanced at the shadow and said coldly, who's down there? Shh. A childish voice came from under the table. Yo-Yo could vaguely tell that the voice belonged to a 7 or 8-year-old girl. A little girl? There was someone in the room. Gongjie was also very surprised. When he and Yo-Yo entered the room, although they didn't pay much attention, with his vigilance, he wouldn't have only noticed if there was someone in the room. This girl was hiding there. Even her breathing was very light. Yo-Yo didn't let his guard down just because it was a child's voice. He casually pulled the curtains open and looked around. The shadows were dispelled. Under the sunlight, a little girl in a white lace one-piece nightgown hugged her knees and squatted under the table. When she saw Yo-Yo pull the curtains open, she, who was used to the darkness, instinctively covered her eyes with her hands. She wasn't frightened, but the sunlight was too glaring. Her body shrank into a ball. At first glance, she looked like a furry snow rabbit. Her dark chestnut hair was slightly curled like seaweed, covering her small back. Such beautiful hair, but wrapped around a small face. Under the sunlight, her snow-white porcelain doll skin was even more obvious. It was clean, like a congealed cream, without a trace of impurities. Her face was too small. Her hands weren't big to begin with. When she used her hands to cover her eyes, half of her face was covered. When she gradually got used to the light, the girl finally put down her hands carefully. However, when Yo-Yo saw her violet eyes, he was stunned. This little snow rabbit's eyes were pure violet. It was too rare. Purple eyes were rare in this world. The girl's facial features were exquisite and deep. Although she hadn't fully matured yet, one could vaguely see that she had a three-dimensional silhouette. Her ancestors must be of mixed Eurasian origin. The color of the pupils was related to the human race. The further north a race went, the shorter the amount of sunlight they received. As a result, the amount of melanin in their bodies decreased. Therefore, their pupils, skin color, and hair color became lighter. Most Asians had brown pupils, Africans had black pupils, and Europeans had blue, gray, and green pupils. However, purple was a relatively rare color in the world. There were very few people with purple irises. This color had nothing to do with genetic mutations, and it was not considered unhealthy. However, most people with purple irises were Eurasian. The girl was very beautiful, especially her pair of purple eyes that were like precious gems. When she blinked her eyes, they sparkled. Gong Jie was also a little surprised. He also saw the girl's purple eyes and was shocked. This could be said to be an extraordinary pupil. Yo-Yo frowned and pursed his lips. Before he could say anything, the girl immediately realized and shushed him. Don't let her find out that I'm here. Chapter 4065. Ha! Yo-Yo could not help but be suspicious. He thought that the girl was referring to Alice or Romanka. Could such a beautiful girl be Professor Romanka's patient? He and Gong Jie looked at each other, feeling incredulous at once. Yu could not help feeling curious about her. His interest was piqued as he squatted down to her eye level and looked into her bright purple eyes. What's your name? The little snow bunny tilted her head and revealed a friendly smile. She said softly, Natalia. Natalia? What a nice and special name. Yo-Yo nodded and said, My name is Yo-Yo. The little snow bunny felt a little strange when she heard that. She muttered, I didn't ask for your name. Yo-Yo did not know whether to laugh or cry when he heard that. This little girl was too cute. Yo-Yo pretended to be sad. Don't you want to know my name? The little snow bunny shook her head gently. No. Why? Because I don't know you. The little snow bunny was not as friendly as Yo-Yo. She was still curled up in a small corner. Obviously, she did not want to talk to him. Don't talk to me. Otherwise, she will definitely find out about me. Find out about you? Yo-Yo was getting more and more curious. Who? Alice? The little snow bunny ignored him. She hugged her knees and squatted in the corner. If one did not look carefully, she really looked like a furry snow bunny. What a strange girl. Just as Yo-Yo was feeling puzzled, Alice opened the door and walked in. She looked around and saw Yo-Yo and Gong Jie standing by the bed. She asked without much hope, Did you see a 7 or 8-year-old girl with chestnut-colored hair? A girl? Gong Jie instinctively glanced under the table when he heard that. Alice did not catch his subtle glance. She continued, Yes, I think you didn't see her either. It's strange. The surveillance camera showed that she came here, but it didn't capture her after she turned a corner. This is a blind spot. A living person just disappeared into thin air. Yo-Yo guessed that Alice was looking for her and that Natalia was hiding from Alice. He looked at Natalia, but she kept winking at him with her hands clasped together. She was obviously begging him not to reveal her hiding place. Yo-Yo was quick to react. Alice saw him staring at the bottom of the table. She could not help but become suspicious. She walked over and followed his gaze. When she saw Natalia, she saw her. When she saw her, she saw Natalia, and saw Natalia's. Yo-stu. So you're here, Natalia. I've been looking for you for a long time. Alice pinched the tip of her nose, but Natalia slapped her hand away unhappily. She pouted angrily and glared at Yo-Yo. She was obviously blaming him for revealing her hiding place. Yo-Yo felt a little wronged. He did not reveal it. Are you playing hide-and-seek? Alice nodded. Yes, I guess so. I'm taking her back to the ward now. When Natalia heard that they were going back to the ward, her smile disappeared. She threw a tantrum. I don't want to go back to the ward. Chapter 4066. Yu was a little surprised to hear that. Is she, your patient? Alice shook her head and said, she is Professor Romanka's daughter. Daughter? She didn't look like one. She didn't look like one at all. As an Asian, she looked at foreigners with the same face. But Yo-Yo could tell. Professor Romanka had an aquiline nose and a well-defined face. He looked like a typical European man. Natalia, on the other hand, didn't look like she was of European descent. Her skin wasn't sickly pale either. Wait for me here. I'll be right back. With that, Alice carried Natalia out of the room. Through the window, Yu caught sight of his mother's gloomy expression. Her eyes were tinged with worry, and it was clear that she was very resistant to the idea. He was determined to get to the bottom of this. So, when Alice came back, he went straight to the point. Natalia isn't Professor Romanka's biological daughter, right? Alice was obviously a little surprised. She didn't bring him to meet Professor Romanka officially. How did he know? Yo-Yo saw her suspicion and explained, there is a portrait of him in the hospital. It says that he is Professor Romanka. It should be his photo, right? Alice was surprised. I didn't expect you to be so observant. So, she's really not his biological daughter? Gong Jie looked on coldly. His nephew seemed to be especially sad about that girl. Love at first sight. First awakening of love. Yo-Yo didn't notice Gong Jie's meaningful look. He said seriously, she seems to be very unhappy. She has been avoiding you. Alice said helplessly, because she refuses to go back to the ward. She's a patient. I guess so. Guess so. Yo-Yo wasn't satisfied with this vague explanation. Your explanation is too far-fetched. You seem to care about her a lot. Alice also noticed this. Natalia is indeed very beautiful, just like a porcelain doll. Don't change the topic. All right. Alice immediately raised her hands in surrender and replied, she's an orphan. She was adopted by Professor Romanka when she was 3 years old. At that time, Natalia was just an ordinary little girl. But, now, she's just like you. Yo-Yo blurted out, do you have dual personality disorder? If she was like him, wouldn't that mean she had a split personality? Alice nodded. Yes. Suddenly, she pondered for a moment and decided to tell the truth. However, her other personality was cultivated by Professor Romaga. Nurture. Not to mention Yo-Yo, even Gong Jie was surprised. Can one's personality be cultivated? Gong Jie was also suspicious. Previously, Alice had mentioned this idea. However, at that time, he thought it was just an idea. He didn't expect that personalities could really be cultivated. For a patient with dual personality disorder, the other personality is originally a split from the main personality and cultivated. Just like you, Yo-Yo. Gong Fan's personality was also cultivated subconsciously in your heart. Therefore, if the main personality can be cultivated, the outside world can also cultivate it. Was that so? Could a normal person also cultivate a second personality through cultivation? Chapter 4067. When Yo-Yo heard this, his face turned cold. Can I take it that Professor Romanka adopted her to use her as a test subject? Alice hesitated for a moment. Not all of it. Not all of it. Yes, Professor Romanka never had a child in his life. He found Natalia in the orphanage, so he adopted her as his daughter. Later, he was too obsessed with this field and wanted to conquer it, so he did not hesitate to use Natalia as a test subject. Yo-Yo's eyes turned even colder. Don't you think this is cruel? Science is very cruel. Their existence is to find and conquer the difficult problems in this field. They don't care about ethics and morals. I also said that most of us are crazy. Just like the Hurricane Group, the world thinks that Hurricane Group is the cause of war, and they also think that the Hurricane Group is cruel. But isn't the real cruelty the deep-rooted ambition of human beings? Alice's words made Yo-Yo a little angry, but he was speechless. She was right. Humans were cruel and selfish. Scientists were not philanthropists. They would do anything to achieve their goals. No wonder when she heard the footsteps, especially when she heard Alice's voice, Natalia felt as if she was facing a great enemy. No one wanted to be locked in such a cold and miserable ward. For some reason, Yo-Yo felt especially sorry for her. Maybe he had the same memory as Natalia. When he was young, he was locked in a snow-covered ward, unable to see the sun. He felt that the world was cold. For some reason, Yo-Yo felt a little depressed. Alice could tell that he felt sorry for Natalia. I am negotiating with Professor Romanka now. Alice squatted in front of him and said gently, I have discussed with him. Lucy will stay by his side and I will take care of Natalia. Really? Yo-Yo widened his eyes. Professor Romanka is willing? What do you think? Alice smiled. Dual personality disorder and multiple personality disorder are two completely different fields. Professor Romaga is obviously more interested in multiple personality disorder. Multiple personality disorder was definitely the result of a split personality, but a split personality did not necessarily result in multiple personality disorder. In terms of the value of the test subject, it was obvious that Lucy was better. Although Natalia was his daughter, they weren't related by blood, and their relationship wasn't that deep. At least for that lunatic, academic achievements were definitely more important. That's why I'm confident that the negotiations will be successful. This way, I'll be able to bring Natalia back. Yo-Yo frowned slightly. Gongjie asked with concern, did you bring Natalia back for research? When Yo-Yo heard this, she was instantly alarmed. Really? He immediately thought of the horrifying and cruel human experimentation. Alice didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You two are singing the same tune. I haven't said anything yet. Why are you both glaring at me so fiercely? Am I that crazy in your eyes? Yo-Yo didn't think much of it. Don't you think you're crazy? Gongjie added, you're no better than Professor Romanka, a woman who always talked about dissection. A woman who could stand in the dissection room and elegantly taste red wine. Chapter 4068. Alice wanted to cry but had no tears. She felt that in the eyes of Yo-Yo and Gongjie, she had become the representative of the devil. However, was she really that scary? Although there were some twists and turns in the process, Yo-Yo still managed to see Lucy as he wished. She was locked up in a ward. Although it was said that she was receiving humanitarian treatment, she was no different from a criminal. Yo-Yo saw that there were all kinds of surveillance cameras installed in the ward. There were 2 in one corner and more than 10 in the whole room. It could be said that they were monitoring her from all directions. Yo-Yo guessed that there might be surveillance cameras installed in the washroom as well. Professor Romanka would not let go of any blind spots to observe Lucy's every word and action. In the ward, there was a door that isolated Lucy from the outside world. There was a window on the door with a metal grill. Through the grill, Yo-Yo saw Lucy sitting in front of the study table alone, quietly drawing. From this perspective, Lucy was no different from a normal person. In fact, people with multiple personality disorder usually looked no different from a normal person. However, Yo-Yo knew that people with multiple personality disorder were completely different from normal people. Who is she now? Gongjie asked curiously and lowered his voice. Alice shook her head. After looking for a while, she was also confused. If she is drawing, she should be Lucy. She likes drawing very much. Usually, when she has nothing to do, she will quietly draw by herself. Oh. Yo-Yo did not feel good. He was glad that he was protected by so many people. Be it his daddy, mommy, Gongjie, Xiaochen, and Lisa, they were all protecting him with all their hearts. Back then, for some reason, a professor knew about his condition. He was a famous psychiatrist in London and wanted to bring him over to study his condition. Yoon Shusha vehemently disagreed. At that time, the professor was sincere and repeatedly emphasized that if it was delayed, he was worried that his condition would worsen. However, Yoon Shusha's attitude was even more unyielding. On the surface, Tongning did not reveal her intentions. But, deep down, she knew that even though this professor claimed to be researching Yo-Yo's condition for his own good, his motives were not pure. He simply wanted to use Yo-Yo to complete his research. Yoon Shusha was very determined. Even if her condition worsened, she did not want Yo-Yo to be like those patients with multiple personality disorder who were imprisoned by the hospital like prisoners. Every day, they faced the snow-white world without any freedom. Yo-Yo had experienced this kind of helplessness and loneliness since she was young. She didn't want Yo-Yo to face it again. Mu Yaja was also very protective of Yo-Yo. Whether it was Yo-Yo's personality or Gong Fan's personality, he treated them all the same. He firmly believed that even if Gong Fan's personality wasn't the main personality, he was still a part of Yo-Yo. They were both his son. Lucy had been locked up here for a long time. Originally, she only had 5 personalities. But now, she had 10 personalities. As for the other 5 personalities, they were not split from her body. Professor Romanka had used hypnosis to create a dream for her. Furthermore, the split personality was completed in the dream. Chapter 4069. Professor Romanka took an unconventional approach. He created a police personality and kept hypnotizing that personality. He wanted to urge that personality to destroy all of Lucy's bad personalities. Destroy all of them? When Yo-Yo heard this, he felt a chill run down his spine. How? Professor Romanka is preparing an experiment. An experiment? Yes. Alice explained, he wants to gather all the personalities together through the dream. Then, he will awaken the personality that represents the police and make it a part of the main body. He will also tell her to kill the few evil and negative personalities and leave behind the only good main personality. If this experiment is successful, then he will definitely achieve absolute academic results in the field of multiple personalities. Too selfish. Yo-Yo frowned. What's the difference between this and killing people? Alice was silent for a while. I agree with this idea, but I don't agree with his method. I also think that this method is too cruel. Moreover, it treats the symptoms but not the root cause. Today, he can use the good personality to kill the bad personality. How can he prevent the good personality from becoming bad? How can he prevent a new bad personality from splitting? I have argued with him, but he is stubborn. I can't persuade him. So, Lucy will become a test subject? Alice nodded and smiled. I can't help you even if I want to. After all, I'm not an authority in this academic field. I have no right to speak. Moreover, Lucy is also a patient he took over. I can't interfere with his treatment. Yo-Yo suddenly became alert. If his experiment is successful, then, will you repeat this experiment on me? Alice was speechless and said helplessly, if I use you as an experiment, your uncle will definitely tear me into pieces. Gong Jie expressed that he was implicated. Am I that scary? You're scarier than I said. Alice said tactfully, if I dare to use this treatment plan on your biological nephew, you will definitely let me die without a burial place. Not to that extent. Gong Jie's expression was nonchalant. Because you don't dare to either. Alice could not help but laugh when she heard that. She glanced at Yu and shrugged. Look. Yo-Yo covered her mouth and giggled. This uncle of mine is still quite protective of me at critical moments. Gong Jie rubbed his head in annoyance. That's right. Shouldn't I protect you when it's not critical? Ingrate. All right. Uncle is the best. After being praised by Yo-Yo, Gong Jie could not help but feel smug. Is uncle better or daddy better? Both are fine, Yo-Yo answered ambiguously. Gong Jie did not give up and continued to ask another question. If you were given 2 choices, play with your uncle or play with your daddy, which one would you choose? He seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for her. Only a resentful woman would ask such a question. Alice said coldly, Is this a question that only divorced people ask about their children? Gong Jie said arrogantly, why? Can't I ask? As he said that, he looked at Yo-Yo expectantly. Yo-Yo pondered for a long time and finally answered honestly, Daddy is fine. Why? Gong Jie looked hopeless. How was he inferior to Muyaja? Chapter 4070. Oh, my God. This was a critical hit. How could they bully him like this? Critical hit. This was the highest level of public display of affection that Gong Jie had ever seen. How could you bully him like this? Alice could not stand it anymore. You're just shooting your uncle in the heart. Gong Jie clutched his heart and expressed his sadness. Yo-Yo, you're hurting my heart. Alice smiled and suddenly raised her wrist to look at the time. Realizing that it was getting late, she said, all right, I still have something to do here. This hospital has a huge back garden. You guys can take a stroll around. I'll fight with Professor Romanka for Natalia's custody. With that, she left. Gong Jie felt bored staying here, so he wanted to take a stroll in the back garden. Yo-Yo agreed. He had come this time to see what kind of treatment plan was for his dissociative identity disorder, but ever since he entered this hospital, he had only felt endless depression. Initially, he wanted to consider whether to accept treatment, but now, it seemed that he had to give up immediately. I don't want Gong Fan to disappear. Yo-Yo said truthfully, if he disappears, I'm probably not a complete me. Gong Jie agreed. I also think that the treatment plan so far is not suitable for you. However, don't worry. No matter how bad the situation is, there will be a way out. You don't have to worry too much. Yo-Yo frowned as he felt a headache coming on. I just feel that my mental state has been a little bad recently. What's wrong? I keep feeling like I can't wake up. I go to bed early, but when I wake up, I still feel very tired. Moreover, the symptoms of memory loss are becoming more and more obvious. Memory loss? Yes. In the past, I might have vaguely understood what happened to Gong Fan's personality, but now that his personality is becoming more and more independent, the two personalities have drawn a clear line. After I become me, I have no idea what happened before. When Gong Jie heard this, his originally relaxed brows knitted again. Don't worry first. I'll ask Alice later. There should be ways to suppress these. Yes. Yo-Yo saw a swing in the garden, so he walked over and sat on it. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows when he saw him sitting on the swing. Aren't you going to take a walk? No, I'll sit here for a while. You go walk around. Okay. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. As Gong Jie said so, he walked around the small path and strolled around the back garden. He preferred gardening. He had invested in real estate all over the world, whether it was villas or bungalows, but gardening had to be of the highest standard. It had to be said that the interior of Michelle Hospital was worlds apart from a garden. The environment in the hospital was so depressing, but the back garden was unbelievably beautiful. It was said that the garden design had won a world-class award. The hospital was established by Professor Romanka, who was particularly picky when it came to garden layouts. Gong Jie was interested, so he walked around the small path, half sightseeing and half taking a stroll. Yo-Yo was a little bored, so he sat on the swing and swung his legs. Just as he was bored to death, he caught a glimpse of a snow-white figure from the corner of his eye. Chapter 4071. Even though she was not far away, Yo-Yo could not see her features clearly as she was hidden in the shadows. However, he could still tell from the corner of her snow-white shirt that it was Natalia. Wasn't she in the ward? Yo-Yo was so shocked that he stood up from the swing. Natalia seemed to have felt his gaze as well. She avoided his gaze and turned to leave. Natalia. Yo-Yo had just called out to her. The figure paused for a moment and immediately ran in another direction. Wait. When Yo-Yo saw this, he immediately chased after her. Natalia did not run very fast. After all, Yo-Yo was taller than her. In a flash, he was about to catch up with her. However, Natalia changed direction and quickly hid in a corner. Yo-Yo chased after her again. When he turned the corner, he raised his head and realized that it was the entrance to the ward building. When he turned the corner, he raised his head and saw Natalia's snow-white figure flickering in and out of view. Wait. Yo-Yo did not know why she had run when she had seen him. He also did not know why she had appeared in the back garden. Wasn't she in the ward? Could it be that she had snuck out again? Yo-Yo chased after her regardless of the consequences. He followed her figure and turned down many corridors. Finally, he saw her at the entrance of a medicine changing room. That was the end of the corridor. She seemed to be lost. She looked around and did not know where to go. Yo-Yo stopped in his tracks and called out softly, "Natalia?" She was obviously frightened. When she turned around and saw that it was him, she did not look too good. Her purple eyes were filled with anger. She was obviously angry. She snorted. However, this snort was not annoying. It was like the meowing of a kitten. He could not help but feel tender affection for her. Yo-Yo guessed that she must have been angry because he had accidentally exposed her whereabouts and had caused her to be captured by Alice. Hence, she couldn't help but feel angry when she saw him. "It's you." Natalia was fluent in Chinese. However, Alice had also mentioned that Natalia had met the child in a welfare home through a good friend when Romanka visited China. Natalia had grown up in China, so she was probably of mixed Eurasian descent. Alice said that Natalia was an abandoned child. No one knew who her mother was or who her father was. She was found at the entrance of the maternity hospital in winter, wrapped in swaddling clothes and curled up in a paper box. When she was found, her face was red from the cold and she was dying. She was so cold that her face was red. If it had happened a little later, he might have been frozen to death. Before Professor Romanka met her, Natalia did not have a name. There were so many children in the welfare home and they were all referred to by numbers. Natalia was called 9 because she was the 9th child to be found that year. "I'm sorry." Yo-Yo apologized sincerely and guiltily. "I really didn't mean to betray you just now." Natalia did not buy it. She pouted and glared at him. She did not want to forgive him. Yo-Yo looked a little uneasy. He asked tentatively, "Are you still angry?" Chapter 4072. She didn't seem to like talking. Yo-Yo couldn't help but size her up. Alice had said that Natalia had dual identity disorder, but he couldn't see anything wrong with it. "Natalia," he tried to test her again by calling her name softly. Natalia looked up. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly. She tilted her head and finally looked at the boy in front of her seriously. She couldn't help but be captivated by his deep and exquisite eyes. "Your eyes are so beautiful." She narrowed her eyes and smiled. There seemed to be a bright light in her eyes. Was she praising him? Yo-Yo smiled back. "Is that so? You really didn't do it on purpose?" Natalia still didn't believe him. Yo-Yo immediately said, "Yes, it's true." "Then, do me a favor and I won't be angry anymore." Natalia crossed her arms in front of her chest. She was as proud as a kitten. Yo-Yo couldn't help but be curious. "What favor?" Natalia's lips curled into a smile. She suddenly reached out and grabbed his hand tightly. "Come." Natalia held Yo-Yo's hand and walked through a corridor. Finally, they stopped in front of a room. She shushed him and carefully pushed the door open. The room looked like an office. Yo-Yo followed her in. Natalia walked to the cabinet and pointed at the top. "Up there. Up there. There's a box up there. If you can take the box down, I'll be friends with you." Yo-Yo couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Did she have such low standards for making friends? "Okay, I'll take it down for you." The cabinet was very tall. It was almost 2 meters tall. Yo-Yo moved a chair over and stood on it. He reached for the box and opened it. Inside was a dazzling array of amber candies. Candies? Yo-Yo was a little surprised. He thought that there was some treasure hidden in the box. It turned out that it was just candies. "Thank you." Natalia took the candy from him with a satisfied smile in her eyes. She took out a green amber candy from the box. It smelled like green apples and handed it to Yo-Yo. "Here." Yo-Yo took the candy in surprise and asked curiously, Why did you leave the candy here?" Natalia pouted, a little angry. "I didn't hide it. They did." "Them?" "Yes, they don't allow me to eat sweets." "Why?" Yo-Yo could not help but worry. She must be talking about Professor Romanka, right? Looking at the decoration of the office, it was obvious that this was Professor Romanka's office. Why didn't he let you eat candy? I don't know. Natalia was clearly unhappy. She hugged the candy box and sat down on the sofa. Smiling, she opened one of the red candy wrappers and showed it to Yo-Yo. My favorite strawberry flavor. Yo-Yo hesitated. On one hand, he felt that the child in front of him was as pure as crystal. She was sad because she couldn't eat candy, but she was smiling because of a candy. He couldn't resist such a smile. On the other hand, he couldn't help but worry. He was worried that Professor Romanka didn't allow her to eat sweets. He was worried that Natalia's health wasn't good. Therefore, he went up and took the candy box back. Don't eat it. The smile on Natalia's face froze. Chapter 4073. Natalia was speechless as she stared at him. Her snow-white face instantly flushed red, and her eyes turned cold. Natalia stood up angrily. Her bright eyes were covered with a thin layer of mist. Give me back the candy. However, Yo-Yo hugged the box tightly. You can't eat it. Why? Natalia blinked, and her eyelashes were wet with tears. Why did you snatch my candy? If Professor Romanka doesn't allow you to eat it, then you must not eat it. So, don't eat it. Yo-Yo was being kind. That was because there were indeed some patients who were strict about their intake of sugar when taking medicine. Natalia seemed to have seen through his concerns, but she became even angrier. You're the same as them. She stood up with a pale face and pushed him away angrily. You're the same as them. As she spoke, she bit her lip in sadness and ran away. Yo-Yo was about to chase after her, but he got up too quickly and accidentally knocked over the trolley. Yu looked on helplessly at her receding figure and sighed. He turned around and squatted down to pick up the stack of documents that had been knocked over on the floor. When he picked them up, Yo-Yo glanced at them and realized that they were Natalia's pathology report. At first, he only glanced at them casually, but his gaze froze. Hallucinogen. This word on the pathology report caught his eye. Yo-Yo held the pathology report and glanced at it seriously. Only then did he realize that Professor Romanka did not allow Natalia to eat candy. Hallucinogen was a hallucinogen that had been developed. It was usually used for mental treatment. People who took this drug would hallucinate. If one took this drug, they could not touch sugar because this drug contained a high amount of lactose. If they took in additional sugar, it might cause diabetes. Therefore, Professor Romanka strictly controlled Natalia's sugar intake. Hallucinogen was not a common English word. Most people did not know it at all. But he knew. This was because Gong Fan had been taking this medicine while he was recuperating on Jack Island. If this drug was taken lightly, it would have a certain sleep-inducing effect. However, Yu noticed that the dosage on the pathology report was 5 times more than his. This was already considered high content. If hallucinogen was taken in excess, there was a certain risk of death. Why would Romanka do that? Yo-Yo was furious. There you are. Outside the door, Gong Jie heaved a sigh of relief. He pushed the door open and walked in, muttering, "Didn't you say you were going to wait for me on the swing? When I saw you disappear, I was even prepared to commit suicide to atone for my sins." He sounded so pitiful that it sounded a little exaggerated. But in reality, he really imagined Yun Shusha's dark side. Yo-Yo was the apple of her eye. If he dared to lose his biological nephew, he wouldn't be able to make up for it by just cutting his own throat. Yo-Yo raised her eyebrows when she saw Gong Jie. Hallucinogen. Alice was a little surprised. What's going on? In the office, Yo-Yo spread Natalia's pathology report in front of Alice. Alice picked it up and looked at it. She was stunned. What's going on? Don't you know? Yo-Yo was a little surprised. He thought that Alice would definitely know. Chapter 4074. Hallucinogen is a hallucinogen. I'm sure Professor Romanka knows the real use of this drug. Yo-Yo paused. The muscles on her face stiffened. Alice held the pathology report and hesitated for a long time. Then, she suddenly realized something. Maybe I've guessed why Professor Romanka gave her this drug. Perplexed, The boy sought confirmation from his father. Tell me. What's the reason? This drug is toxic. Although the dosage is not critical, it's still higher than the normal dosage used for pathology. You know that this drug is hallucinogenic. Yes. For general medication, for example, when a patient has bipolar disorder, anxiety, or insomnia, taking this medicine, a small dose can have a certain calming effect. However, according to this dosage, the person taking the drug will have hallucinations. Hallucinations. Yes. In other words, Yo-Yo obviously guessed Professor Romanka's intention. Her expression turned cold. Alice nodded and sighed. I'm guessing that Professor Romanka wants to experiment on Natalia. He wants to create hallucinations to awaken or create Natalia's second personality. By creating hallucinations, he wants Natalia's main personality to believe that she has a twin sister. When the main personality believes in the hallucinations and tampers with her memories, she will naturally split into a second personality. In theory, this is the case, but no one has ever practiced it. Of course, when Professor Romanka wanted to use me to hypnotize Natalia and create a second personality, I didn't agree. It seems that he has resorted to this unorthodox method to achieve his goal. Yo-Yo clenched her fists tightly. She must stop taking the drug immediately. I'm guessing that the drug has already stopped. Alice said, this pathology report is from last month. This month, the drug should have stopped. Then, she couldn't help but be curious. How did you get this pathology report? Yo-Yo pondered for a moment and decided to keep this a secret for now. I got lost in the hospital and accidentally walked into a room. In the room, I saw this pathology report. Of course, he was curious. Natalia had been brought back to the ward by Alice. Why would she appear in the backyard? Although he was curious, since he had promised Natalia to keep this a secret, he naturally had to keep his promise. I see. Alice nodded and said seriously, Professor Romanka is too much. He shouldn't have done this. Natalia is his daughter. Doesn't he think it's cruel? It's too much to use his own daughter for an experiment. Gong Jie could not help but chuckle at the boy's concern for Natalia. He could not help reminding him, Natalia isn't Professor Romanka's biological daughter. Not every adoptive father would treat their adopted daughter as their own. Professor Romanka might have adopted Natalia with a purpose in mind. Yo-Yo's heart ached. He suddenly raised his head and tugged at Gong Jie's sleeve. It seemed like he was negotiating, but his tone was commanding. Uncle, will you adopt Natalia? What? Gong Jie was baffled, his face full of question marks. Why should I adopt her? Chapter 4075. But Natalia has already been adopted by Professor Romanka. Gong Jie reminded him kindly. Yo-Yo did not take it seriously and retorted, this is not adoption, this is abuse. Alice agreed seriously. According to international law, Professor Romanka did not violate any adoption laws. His adoptive relationship with Natalia is legal and we have no way of interfering. As for your uncle, he can't adopt Natalia directly because she doesn't meet the requirements for adoption. Yo-Yo could not help but feel melancholy when he heard this. When Alice saw this, she could not help but be interested. She squatted in front of him and gently tugged at his little hand. Do you like her? Yo-Yo immediately blushed. He avoided her gaze awkwardly and snorted, no. Then, why are you so concerned about her? Alice grinned and wanted to get to the bottom of this. Gong Jie rubbed his nephew's head dotingly and said, our Yo-Yo is experiencing his first awakening of love. Has he fallen for a girl? Yo-Yo blushed and emphasized, don't talk nonsense. I just feel that Natalia is very pitiful to be abused like this. He could not help but think of himself. He had been imprisoned in such a world since he was young and had no freedom. But Natalia was different from him. She was a healthy child. It was hard to imagine that she had been abandoned when she was just born. She had survived the harsh winter and had been forced to be locked up in such a hospital and undergo such experiments. She did not have dual personality disorder, but she had been made to have it. She could have been carefree like other children, going out to play or eating delicious sweets. But she could only be locked up in a cold and miserable ward. Even freedom was what she wished for. Professor Romanka is not fit to be her father. As he said this, Yo-Yo looked at Gong Jie with an extremely deep gaze. Gong Jie cleared his throat and said, "Don't tell me, you really want me to adopt her?" Yo-Yo continued to glare at him. Gong Jie continued, "I'm not married yet. Girls like men who are caring and responsible." This brat was clearly trying to drag him into the water. Gong Jie still pretended to be dead, raising his head to look into the distance. Yo-Yo continued to stare at him. The uncle and nephew faced each other in silence. Yo-Yo's gaze was too sharp. Gong Jie could not hold on any longer and surrendered. "I surrender. Please don't glare at me like that. Why don't you let your dear daddy adopt her? That way, you'll have a cute little sister." Yo-Yo pursed her lips. "But daddy and mommy have already adopted Lisa. It's okay. No matter how many Natalias there are, your daddy can afford them all." "That's different." Yo-Yo crossed her arms and said seriously, "I think you're the most suitable candidate." Gong Jie was silent. This brat was obviously trying to push him into the fire pit, wasn't he? Alice said quietly, "You won't lose anything by adopting her. Anyway, you won't be poor. You might as well agree." Gong Jie's face turned pale. "I don't know how to take care of a child. How do you expect me to take care of her?" When he thought of Natalia's eyes, which were as noble and inviolable as a ragdoll cat, he felt that this little girl was unruly and would not be easy to get along with. Chapter 4076. Alice and Yo-Yo both hoped that Gong Jie would adopt Natalia, but Gong Jie was especially stubborn. "Give up. There's no way I'll adopt Natalia." However, half an hour later, Gong Jie sat in front of Professor Romanka with an ashen face and slammed the table. "I want custody of Natalia. Whether you're willing or not, you have to give it up to me." Professor Romanka stared at him in shock. Alice sized up Gong Jie before turning to look at Professor Romanka. Smiling, she said, "Young Master Jie feels that he and this child are fated." After a pause, Alice whispered into his ear, "Professor, you don't know this, but young Master Jie doesn't like women, so he wants to adopt a child. But don't worry, he'll definitely treat Natalia well and treat her like his own." Professor Romanka couldn't bear to part with her. It wasn't because he had deep feelings for Natalia. It was because he didn't want to give up on Natalia. After all, her condition would be helpful to his research. He was naturally unwilling to give up on her just like that. Professor Romanka shook his head, obviously unwilling. However, Gong Jie didn't mind using force since he wouldn't listen to soft tactics. "Don't think that I don't know what research you're using Natalia for." Gong Jie narrowed his eyes and said, "I already have evidence of you abusing the adopted child. If this is brought to the International Court of Justice, all your fame and fortune will be gone." Professor Romanka turned pale with fright. "What do you mean by that? You're using Natalia for your experiments, aren't you?" Gong Jie leaned closer to him and said expressionlessly, "Hallucinogen. Just this pathology report alone is enough to make you suffer." Professor Romanka had initially suspected that Gong Jie was making an empty comment without any evidence. He didn't expect him to have Natalia's pathology report in his hands. Professor Romanka could no longer sit still. Alice shook her head helplessly. Lowering her voice, she said, "Professor Romanka, you know that young Master Jie is from Hurricane Group. You wouldn't want to offend Hurricane Group, right?" Professor Romanka forced a smile and was silent for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and nodded. "All right, but Natalia's condition is very unstable. If anything happens, send her to my research center immediately." Yo-Yo stood to the side. When she heard Professor Romanka's words and saw that there was no trace of reluctance in his eyes, she was even more certain that Natalia was just a sacrifice in Professor Romanka's eyes. An experimental subject. He had no feelings for her at all. He was all the more glad that he had made a wise choice by forcing Gong Jie to adopt Natalia. This man didn't deserve to be Natalia's father. In the ward, Natalia was leaning against the window alone. She looked out of the window in a daze. Her gaze was empty and unfocused. Her chestnut-colored hair fell to the side of her ears. She pouted. She didn't know how long she had been sitting like that until a soft rustling sound came from the door. Puzzled, She looked in the direction of the sound and saw a small hand sneaking in a candy from the corner of the door. Candy! Natalia's gaze froze. She walked over, squatted down at the door, and picked up the candy. It was her favorite strawberry flavor. Chapter 4077. Just as she finished speaking, another piece of candy rolled in through the crack of the door. When Natalia saw it, she couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. She picked it up again. It was a green, apple-flavored candy. Who was it? She couldn't help but wonder who would be so bored as to slip candy through the crack of the door. Who is it? She asked again. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another 3 pieces of candy rolled in. Natalia picked them up and suddenly realized that they were a different flavor from the candy she had hidden earlier. There were purple and pink ones. She had never eaten this kind of candy before. Thus, she curiously peeled it open and realized that this candy was actually soft candy. She put it in her mouth and took a bite. A rich yogurt flavor suddenly overflowed between her lips and teeth. So sweet. It also had a slightly sour taste. However, this sourness didn't affect the texture at all. Instead, it was sour and sweet. It was even more delicious than the candy she had eaten before. She didn't eat candy much. Before she was 6 years old, she didn't even know that candy existed. Later, when she came to Michelle Hospital, a nurse saw that she was cute and secretly gave her a piece of candy. That was the first time she had tasted something so sweet. She liked it very much. This nurse also really loved her. Every time she saw her, she would give her all the candy she had on her. Sometimes, it was apple-flavored. Sometimes, it was strawberry-flavored. Sometimes, it was grape-flavored. However, this nurse only had 2 kinds of candies on her. They were both hard candies. Sometimes, it was 1 piece. Sometimes, it was several pieces. Later, the nurse gradually became busy. Often, there were many times when she wouldn't see her for a few days. Thus, Natalia would secretly hide these candies in a box. Just like that, from 1 or 2 candies at the beginning, she had stocked up a box full of them. She especially loved candies, but she couldn't bear to eat them. Because at that time, Professor Romanka had started experimenting on her and warned her not to eat sugar. She didn't know what would happen if she ate the candy, so she ate it secretly. Later, Professor Romanka found the candy hidden under her pillow. Following the clues, he found a box full of candy. In a fit of anger, he scolded her harshly and hid the candy in his office. Since then, Natalia was no longer close to Professor Romanka. Natalia didn't like Professor Romanka to begin with. Children are intelligent because they do not understand many things. But often, children like or hate a person. It all depends on whether that person is friendly to the child or not. Although Professor Romanka seemed to love her and was close to her, for some unknown reason, Natalia simply did not like him. If she could choose, she would definitely choose to stay in the orphanage instead of following Professor Romanka. So far, she still called Professor Romanka Professor. In fact, the first reason why Romanka adopted her was because he found her cute. The second reason was that he felt that she had a certain amount of potential. She could split into 2 personalities and would be a good test subject. There were too many factors that could be exploited. Chapter 4078. She had been locked up in the ward for a long time, but she was not willing to be imprisoned like this. After researching for a long time, she finally found a secret door that allowed her to enter and exit the ward freely. Thus, Natalia would often sneak out of prison. She had always wanted to secretly take back the candy box in Professor Romanka's office when he was not paying attention. This was hers, and Professor Romanka had no right to take it away. Actually, she had stopped taking her medicine, so she could eat candy. However, Professor Romanka had forgotten about this, so he did not take it to heart. Natalia was not close to him, so she was not willing to be honest with Professor Romanka about anything. Professor Romanka naturally did not understand why Natalia always escaped from the ward. Delicious. Candy made people happy. There was no doubt about this. Natalia's mood suddenly brightened, as if the sky had cleared after the rain. It tasted really good. However, there seemed to be only one of this flavor of jelly candy. Was there no more? She could not help but feel disappointed. She lay on the ground and looked outside through the crack in the door. She saw a few candies lying alone outside the door, but no one was outside. Who was the person who had given her candies just now? Natalia was curious, so she sneaked to the window. She took out a powerful magnet from her pocket and used it to unlock the window. She flipped out of the window and landed on the ground. When she turned around to look at the door, she was surprised to see that there was a line of candies at the door that stretched all the way to the end of the corridor. She walked over curiously and looked for a while. Then, she squatted down and picked up the candies one by one. She followed the path of the candies and walked to the end of the corridor. However, she found that there were still candies lying quietly on the ground around the corner. Natalia hid in the corner of the wall and looked around. From afar, she could see candies stretching out in a straight line. There was no end in sight. It seemed like a prank, but it did not seem like one. Who was it? Could it be that someone was deliberately playing a trick on her? Natalia frowned. She was a little suspicious, but she still followed the path of the candies and picked them up one by one. When she reached the end of the corridor, Natalia had picked up all the candies. By then, the pockets of her hospital gown were full. She stood up and suddenly saw a figure standing at the end of the corridor. She looked and walked closer curiously. Only then did she realize that Yo-Yo was standing there quietly with a box of candies in his hands. This box of candies was the one that had been confiscated. He smiled at her and waved at her. "Come here." Natalia walked closer, and Yo-Yo handed the box of candies to her. "Here." Seeing him reminded her of the day when he didn't let her eat candy. Natalia was still a little upset. "Why is it you again?" Pausing for a moment, she thought about it and asked suspiciously, "Did you leave all these candies at the door?" "Yes." "Is it good?" Natalia almost nodded her head in disappointment. She held it in and snorted coldly. Her face was full of arrogance, but she was unwilling to talk to him. "Are you still angry?" asked the boy helplessly. Natalia glared at him, clearly regarding him as a bad guy. Chapter 4079. Yo-Yo immediately begged for mercy. "I was wrong. I thought you were sick and couldn't eat sweets." Natalia immediately retorted, "I'm not sick. I'm not sick." "Well, now I know that you're not sick. You can eat sweets." Yo-Yo clasped his hands together and looked like he was wronged. He blinked at her carefully and said, "Don't be angry, okay?" Perhaps it was his playful gaze that finally dispelled Natalia's anger. She took a deep breath and raised her eyebrows. "Okay," she said, pretending to be generous. "Forget it. You didn't mean it." As she spoke, she stared at the candy box in Yo-Yo's hand. She couldn't bring herself to take it, so she hinted at him with her eyes to hand it over. Yu could not help feeling helpless when he saw her staring fixedly at the candy box. Wasn't this girl too gullible? If she was a stranger, wouldn't she be able to get him to leave with a few sweets? Yo-Yo deliberately lifted the candy box. Natalia's purple eyes followed the movement of the candy box. Yo-Yo could even imagine her saliva flowing out of her mouth. "Do you want some?" he asked. Natalia immediately became alert. She pretended to be calm and tried not to care, but her throat moved. It was obvious that she was craving the candy. "That's my candy." She emphasized this sentence. Yo-Yo said seriously, "Although the candy box looks like yours, it's not yours. Also, the candy inside is mine." "You're lying." "I'm not lying. If you don't believe me, you can see for yourself." Yo-Yo opened the candy box. Natalia took a look and realized that the candy inside was really not hers. Moreover, these were the soft candies that she had tasted earlier. They tasted better than the ones she had hidden. Natalia's eyes were glued to the candy box. She was craving it. In fact, the so-called candy box was just an ordinary box that could be seen in hospitals. It was a metal box used to store surgical instruments. She secretly took one and used it to hide sweets. She gulped and swallowed her saliva. In fact, she really wanted it, but she pretended to be reserved and just stared at it. Yo-Yo was almost amused by her unblinking expression, but he held it in and asked her, "Do you want some?" Natalia nodded, then blushed and quickly shook her head. "I don't want to eat. This candy is my favorite." Yo-Yo said as she peeled a piece of candy and popped it into her mouth. Delicious. As he chewed, the aroma of blueberries wafted through the air and into Natalia's nose. She took a sniff, and that fresh and fruity aroma made her saliva even more wantonly. It was like a provocation. Because it was a soft candy, the sound of it being chewed made people salivate. After Yo-Yo finished eating, he smacked his lips and licked them. It smells so good. Natalia felt that she was about to drool when she opened her mouth. She gulped but did not say anything. She just stared at him quietly. When Yo-Yo saw this, he laughed in his heart. Hence, he peeled a strawberry-flavored soft candy and walked over to her. He held the soft candy between his fingers and looked at her with a smile. Chapter 4080. Just by looking at it, Natalia could imagine the sweetness of the jelly candy when it was squeezed between her teeth. The sweet juices flowed freely between her lips and teeth. Yo-Yo squeezed the soft candy and smiled deeply. "Do you want to eat it?" Natalia did not say anything, but she did not look away either. She just stared at the candy in his hand. Apart from her desire, she did not have the ability to think. However, she did not give in. She still looked proud and aloof. She had no intention of bending over for the soft candy. "You don't want to eat it? What a pity. This candy tastes better than your candy." Natalia thought to herself, "Of course it tastes good. Just the smell of it is enough to make me want to eat it." But she could not give in. Natalia tried her best to retract her gaze, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop staring at him. That candy was simply too tempting. She could not help it. She could not help it. No, she could not give in. She had to be reserved. As she thought about it, she did not move, but she could not look away either. She could only let her saliva run wild. Yo-Yo looked at her expression and sighed in his heart. Wasn't this girl a little too cute? She stared at the candy without blinking. She was obviously trying to act nonchalant, but her unblinking gaze betrayed her. He had already seen her swallow a few times, but she was still holding it in. She was saying no, but her body was telling the truth. He could not bear it. Forget it. He would not tease her anymore. Otherwise, he would look very unkind. Hence, he brought the candy to her mouth. "Eat it. I'll feed you. Hurry up and eat it. Otherwise, she would be drooling." Natalia swallowed hard. Just as she was about to open her mouth and suck on the candy, Yo-Yo suddenly said, "After eating this candy, we will be friends, okay?" When Natalia heard this, she stopped herself. She shut her mouth and glanced at him in disdain. She finally looked at him, but it was from the corner of her eye. It was obvious that she despised him. Her gaze seemed to say, "Are you trying to bribe me with a candy? Naive." Yo-Yo laughed. "Why? Are you not willing to be my friend?" Natalia shook her head. Yo-Yo tilted her head and rubbed her chin. "You don't like me?" Natalia's face was still cold. "It seems that one piece of candy is not enough." Yo-Yo picked up the candy box again. "If you become my friend, then this box of candy will be yours." Natalia was finally shaken. It wasn't that he wasn't tempted. Looking at the box full of candies, her eyes were filled with yearning. Yo-Yo brought the candy to her mouth again. His voice was bewitching as he tried to seduce her. "Be good, eat it." Natalia couldn't take it anymore. She opened her little mouth and carefully bit the candy. The sugar wasn't very big. With this action, her lips touched his fingertips slightly. Yo-Yo couldn't help but blush. He felt as if his fingertips had been scorched by her touch. It was burning. Natalia was completely unaware. She sucked on the candy and was finally satisfied. This was the first time she had eaten a soft candy, and it was also the first time she had eaten such a delicious candy. It was so sweet. Chapter 4081. Natalia tasted the sweetness in her mouth and her mood improved. When she looked at Yo-Yo again, she finally found him pleasing to the eye. She did not look at him out of the corner of her eye. Instead, she glanced at him. Eventually, her gaze fell on the candy box in Yo-Yo's arms. She looked at it again and again. Half testing, half hinting, she asked, "Is the purple one blueberry?" In other words, she was eagerly waiting for Yo-Yo to let her have a taste of the purple candy. Yo-Yo could not help but want to laugh. This girl looked cold and aloof, but she was actually a little foodie. In front of the candy, she was not reserved at all. Yo-Yo asked tentatively, "Then, will you be my friend?" Unless, Natalia's gaze was firmly fixed on the candy box in Yo-Yo's arms. "If you give me the whole box of candy, I will be your friend." Yo-Yo was a little doubtful that if he gave her the candy box just like that, she would fall out with him. However, Yo-Yo still passed the candy box to her. "Here, you can have it." Natalia was so shocked that her eyes widened. She had not expected that Yo-Yo would be willing to give her so much candy. Did he not eat it? Or, was there poison in the candy? Perhaps it was because the candy was very precious to Natalia. When she saw that Yo-Yo had casually given her the candy, she could not help but doubt the authenticity of the situation. Yo-Yo saw that she was doubting him and held back his laughter. He pursed his lips and said, "These are all yours. Don't worry, I won't take them back." "You won't go back on your word?" "Yes, of course." Natalia's face finally broke into a bright smile. She narrowed her eyes and smiled at Yo-Yo. Then, she peeled another candy and popped it into her mouth. In the distance, Alice and Gong Jie watched and rubbed their chins. "Are you planning to put Natalia in Hurricane?" Gong Jie frowned and pondered for a moment. Yo-Yo said that she doesn't want Natalia to grow up in Hurricane. "Why?" "Because he's worried about you." Alice fell silent. What did he mean by he couldn't be at ease with her around? "Am I a tiger?" "He's afraid that you'll use Natalia as a test subject." Alice fell silent again. Fine. It seemed like her image as a witch had been deeply ingrained in Yo-Yo's heart. "Then where do you plan to settle her?" Gong Jie was also considering this problem. He racked his brains and suddenly thought of a good candidate. Ding dong ding dong. In the apartment, on the big bed in the bedroom, Hua Jin was still deep in sleep. Amidst the constant ringing of the doorbell, he finally woke up. "Who?" He grumbled in annoyance and lay on the bed reluctantly for a while. The doorbell continued to ring, and it seemed to be ringing more and more frequently. He finally got up from the bed and shuffled to the door in his slippers. He thought that the new assistant had made a mistake about the schedule again. He opened the door and said unhappily, "It's my day off today." The moment he opened the door, Hua Jin saw the tall figure standing at the door and woke up instantly. The sleepy bug also disappeared without a trace in an instant. Gong, before he could finish his sentence, he caught a glimpse of Yo-Yo standing next to Gong Jie and a strange but cute little girl. He couldn't be more awake. "What's going on? Move away." Chapter 4082. Get out of my way. Gong Jie pushed him aside and walked into the apartment like the man of the house. "Hey," before Hua Jin could stop him, Gong Jie had already walked into the bedroom. Hua Jin was even more dumbfounded. What was this? Was he trespassing? Yo-Yo held Natalia's hand and walked in. She looked around and asked in confusion, "Uncle Hua Jin, are you still not up?" Hua Jin rubbed his forehead helplessly and nodded weakly. "It's my day off today, so I'm catching up on sleep." "Catching up on sleep?" "Yeah." Hua Jin said, "I'm resting for 3 days." "Why? Is there something wrong?" He lowered his head and saw the cute little girl beside Yo-Yo looking up at him. He couldn't help but think that this little girl was really beautiful. What was even more surprising was that this girl had purple eyes. He was shocked and squatted down to look at the girl's eyes. Natalia saw that Hua Jin kept staring at her. At first, she was not used to it and hid behind Yo-Yo. She was obviously a little timid. Hua Jin smiled at her. "It's okay. Uncle isn't a bad person." For some reason, it seemed that Hua Jin's smile was naturally harmless and harmless. Natalia also realized that this handsome and beautiful man in front of her would definitely not harm her. Hence, she finally gathered her courage and stuck her head out. She blinked her beautiful purple eyes and looked at Hua Jin curiously. Hua Jin was a little surprised by her purple eyes. He thought to himself that such a young child wouldn't wear contact lenses. Moreover, her eyes didn't look like they belonged to someone who wore contact lenses. He was a little surprised. He had never seen someone who was born with purple eyes. Hence, he couldn't help but take a few more looks. Maybe she was born with different eyes. Hua Jin could also tell from Natalia's exquisite features that she was of mixed Eurasian descent. It was probably because she was of mixed blood that the color of her pupils was different from that of an ordinary Asian girl. Her name is Natalia. Natalia, what a nice name. Just as he was about to speak, Gong Jie's footsteps came from behind him and stopped beside him. Your house is so small. When Hua Jin heard this, he stood up unhappily and muttered, don't you know how high the housing prices in the capital are? Such an apartment of more than 100 square meters, located in the downtown business district, was worth tens of millions. This man actually thought that this place was too small. Gong Jie sized him up casually before saying out of the blue, put on your clothes. This time, Hua Jin was confused. Huh. More than an hour later, when Hua Jin realized that he was already at the sales office of a villa district, he looked at Yo-Yo and Natalia, who were sitting on his left, and then looked at Gong Jie, who was looking at the floor plan. The sales representative asked cautiously, may I know if you are paying in full or taking a loan? Gong Jie replied, full payment. Hua Jin's mouth opened even wider. Huh. Could he do whatever he wanted just because he was rich? Full payment. This villa was worth more than 100 million because it came with its own furnishings. How could he say full payment so casually? Was this guy trying to sell him off? While Hua Jin was still in a daze, when it was time to sign the contract, the sales representative's eyes lit up. Chapter 4083. May I ask, whose name is this house under? The Gong Jie turned around and asked Hua Jin, what's your name? Hua Jin, real name. Rong Jin, write it yourself. Oh, Hua Jin had just picked up the pen and signed his name on the contract under the guidance of the salesperson. He was even more confused now. He took a closer look and realized that he had signed the contract under the ownership of the villa. Huh. He was even more confused now. He couldn't understand what was going on. Yo-Yo saw Hua Jin's confused face and couldn't bear to see it anymore. Hence, when the Gong Jie went to swipe the card, she said to the confused Hua Jin, Uncle Hua Jin, Natalia is my uncle's adopted daughter. But as you know, his job is a little dangerous and he can't take her with him all the time. After thinking about it, you are the best candidate. Best candidate. Hua Jin looked at Natalia and the corners of his lips twitched. I'm a surrogate adoptive father? Yes. Yo-Yo hugged his arm and said coquettishly, Uncle Hua Jin, please take care of my Natalia. Wait. Hua Jin only felt that his mind was in a mess. He waved his hand and took a deep breath. He finally regained some of his composure. He took a deep breath, opened his eyes and forced himself to calm down. You mean, this child called Natalia was adopted by Gong Jie and he didn't have time to take care of her, so he asked me to take care of her? Yo-Yo nodded. Yes. Hua Jin frowned and sighed helplessly. I don't have any experience in taking care of children. She's not breastfeeding. She doesn't need you to feed her or coax her. Anyway, just take care of her like you would take care of me. When Hua Jin heard this, his brain still went blank. He still hadn't gotten used to the fact that he was about to step into the ranks of newbie stay-at-home dad. His empty eyes fell on Gong Jie. He swallowed and said tentatively, but, I usually have a lot of free time. I have to shoot a movie or something. Gong Jie suddenly fumbled in his arms and asked, how much do you earn in a year? Hua Jin pondered for a moment. This income is not always certain. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. 100 million? I can't get that much. Gong Jie raised his eyebrows. Without saying a word, he took out a stack of checkbooks and wrote something on it with a pen. Hua Jin leaned over to take a look. At that moment, Gong Jie had already signed his name and handed it to him. HSBC. You can withdraw the money directly. Gong Jie handed him a check. It was an empty check. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Yo-Yo explained, you can withdraw as much as you want. Hua Jin swallowed again. This house was registered under his name, and there was even a check like this. I don't deserve this reward. Who said that I don't deserve this reward? Yo-Yo glanced at Natalia and said to Hua Jin, as long as you take good care of her, it'll be fine. As for work, as long as you're free, take on a few movies. If you're not free, take care of Natalia first. You don't have to worry about anything else. Uncle will pay the alimony. Wouldn't the alimony be too much? He didn't dare to take it. Chapter 4084. Keep it well. Gong Jie snorted. Hua Jin shivered in fear and put the check in his pocket. After collecting the receipt and contract for the house purchase, Hua Jin got into Gong Jie's car, only to see the latter instructing the chauffeur to drive them toward the furniture mall. My Kailong Furniture Mall. Yo-Yo brought Natalia to sit in the dessert section. Gong Jie led Hua Jin to the furniture section. Basically, he would pay for the furniture he chose. Hua Jin was speechless. As a celebrity, Hua Jin's income had always been very high. However, it was definitely not so high that he could easily spend 6 or 7 figures just to buy a piece of furniture. A set of kitchen cabinets cost 800,000, a sofa cost 200,000, and a coffee table cost 500,000. When he heard the prices, he was stunned. Wasn't this a little too scary? Originally, he thought that no matter how rich Gong Jie was, he would only be on par with Mu Yaja. Now, it seemed like that was not the case. Buying a villa was like buying a set of toys. As for the furniture, it was like playing house. It was as if the series of zeros on the price tags were just a series of numbers to him. When night came, the furniture was brought in and the electrical appliances were sent to the new home. Hua Jin stood in front of the villa again. It felt like a lifetime had passed. Just what had happened on this day? He still could not react. It was like a dream. Yo-Yo held Natalia's hand and walked into the villa. He announced happily, "Natalia, from now on, this is your new home." Natalia stood at the door in a daze. It took her quite a while to come back to her senses. "Will I be living here from now on?" Natalia's face was a little rosy. She suddenly ran to the sofa and sat down. The sofa was made of American leather and was very comfortable. Sitting on it, she felt like she was being wrapped up. She relaxed her furrowed brows and flashed a smile at Yu. "I like this sofa." Yo-Yo walked over and opened his palm. "Let's go. I'll show you your room." Natalia held Yo-Yo's hand and walked to her princess room. The entire villa was decorated in American style. The princess room had a romantic atmosphere like a fairy tale. The white wooden 4-poster bed, the white bedside, the pink curtains, the light pink theme of the walls, and the beautiful lights. It was a warmth that she had never felt before. "Do you like it?" Natalia pursed her lips and nodded. "Yes. I like it. You'll be staying in this room from now on." "Then, what about you?" "Me? This isn't my home. It's yours." Disappointment flashed across Natalia's eyes. "You don't live here?" Then who's going to live with me?" She suddenly felt uneasy. "Am I going to live alone?" "Of course not." 5 minutes later, Hua Jin squatted in front of Natalia. Yo-Yo stood beside her and reminded her softly, "From now on, he's your guardian. You can call him brother." "Wait," Hua Jin interrupted Yo-Yo. "How did she call you uncle?" "Daddy." Chapter 4085. "Daddy." Hua Jin looked awkwardly at Gong Jie and then at Yo-Yo. He complained bitterly, "Then wouldn't there be a difference in seniority?" When Yo-Yo heard this, she felt that it made sense. She pondered for a while, but before she could say anything, Natalia suddenly said, "Then I'll call you Mommy." "Mommy." Hua Jin almost vomited blood. He clutched his chest in disbelief. How did this guy come up with such a nickname? When Yo-Yo heard this, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She covered her mouth and laughed out loud. "Ha ha ha. Mommy." Gong Jie's face was ashen. He should be angry, but he also felt helpless. More than anything, he was questioning Natalia's logic. Hua Jin immediately explained in all seriousness, "You can't call me Mommy. I'm not a woman." "Hey!" Natalia tilted her head, then threw out a sentence that almost made Hua Jin kneel on the ground. "You're not a woman? I thought you and Daddy were a couple." The painful blow was like an avalanche, covering Hua Jin's face. Hua Jin was so angry that his eyes were about to burst. "What? You thought?" This child actually thought that he was a woman? Hua Jin touched his face, feeling wronged. He admitted that he was a little more handsome, but a child shouldn't think that he was a woman, right? What was worse was that Natalia thought that he was a couple with Gong Jie. Hua Jin was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He had the urge to run out of the door. Natalia saw that Hua Jin's face was ashen. She was so scared that she hid behind Yo-Yo and muttered softly, "Did I say something wrong?" Yo-Yo held back her urge to laugh out loud. She waved her hand and quickly said, "No. No. However, the one standing in front of you is a man, not a woman." Hua Jin muttered unhappily, "The first thing I said when we met was that I was your uncle." "Uncle? Uncle sounds good." Yo-Yo snapped her fingers and said to Natalia, "Why don't you call him uncle?" When Hua Jin heard this, he also felt that it was not bad. Then call me uncle." Gong Jie nodded in agreement. He then said to Natalia, "From now on, you will call him Uncle Hua Jin, okay?" When Hua Jin heard this, he felt a chill run down his spine. It wasn't because of any other reason, but because he realized that when he spoke to Natalia, Gong Jie was unexpectedly gentle. Her voice was soft and gentle, as if she could drown someone. Luckily, he was facing Natalia. If it had been any other woman, his heart would have stopped beating. Even he couldn't help but feel his heart go numb for a moment when he heard this gentle voice. When Natalia heard this, she nodded. Suddenly, she thought of something and suddenly let go of Yo-Yo's arm. She ran to Gong Jie's side and grabbed the corner of his shirt reluctantly. She looked confused and asked, then, "Daddy, where are you going?" Gong Jie furrowed his brows. Even though he had gotten used to having a little girl, who was not related to him by blood, calling him daddy over the past few days, it seemed that he had yet to fully accept the fact that he was a first-time father. After all, he had suddenly changed from a single man to a single daddy. Chapter 4086. However, his feelings for Natalia had improved a lot over the past few days. It was a little strange. Natalia was especially close to him. In order to get close to Natalia, Yo-Yo had tricked her with candy and coaxed her nicely. However, when it came to Gong Jie, Natalia liked him so much that she would stick to him whenever he stood there. Yo-Yo was also curious as to why Natalia liked Gong Jie so much. He had asked her about it before. The little girl said confidently, "Because Daddy is tall and handsome, and he even gives me candy." Yo-Yo was not convinced and retorted, "When I grow up, I will definitely be tall and handsome too. Also, I will give you candy too. But you are not my daddy." Natalia's words made Yo-Yo speechless. He pursed his lips and finally had nothing to say. All right. This was the charm of a mature man. "Daddy, don't you live here?" Natalia hugged Gong Jie's thigh, reluctant to part with him. Gong Jie bent down and easily carried her in his arms. He reached out and pinched the tip of her nose. Raising his eyebrows, he asked, "Why? You can't bear for Daddy to leave." Natalia shook her head like a rattledrum. "Don't go. I want to be with Daddy." Gong Jie frowned slightly. His lips curled into a helpless smile. "I can stay here with you for a few days. However, Daddy has to go out to work after a while. When he is done, Daddy will come back. It won't be long." "Really?" Gong Jie carried her to Hua Jin's side and coaxed her gently. "In the future, you will be with this uncle, You have to be obedient. It's okay if you don't. Daddy will video call you every day. If this uncle mistreats you, you can complain to Daddy and Daddy will beat him up." With just a few words, Natalia was so coaxed that she revealed her pearly white teeth. When Hua Jin heard this, he felt that it was unfair. What was this? Why would he mistreat a child for no reason? Moreover, he liked Natalia. Since Gong Jie had entrusted this child to him, he was not happy to see it happen. However, he could only accept it. However, there was one thing that he still had to confirm. "Are you sure that you will compensate me for my absenteeism?" Gong Jie glanced at him. "I'm sure." Yu replied, "Uncle even put his house under your name. This shows his sincerity." Hua Jin calmed himself down. Suddenly, a bad word popped up in his mind. Does this count as being a sugar baby? __B. Alimony, property. At that moment, Hua Jin felt like a good wife and mother who took care of the household chores and children. Was it too late for him to back out now? For some reason, a scene appeared in Hua Jin's mind. He was standing in front of the stove with Natalia on his back. He was wearing an apron and a scarf, And he was cooking porridge bitterly, OMG. He did not want to become like this. If this went on, he would definitely become a sallow man. Well, Hua Jin looked at Yo-Yo hesitantly. Yo-Yo saw through him immediately. Why? Are you going back on your word? Hua Jin replied vaguely, I'm not mentally prepared yet, am I? What mental preparation do you need? Chapter 4087. Gong Jie had been playing with Natalia. When he heard this, he turned around and said coldly, I will hire a nanny, bodyguard, and gardening for you. You just have to play with her and take care of her. Don't let her feel lonely. That's good enough. In other words, these tasks were Hua Jin's job. Accompany her to eat, drink, and play. Hua Jin was a little surprised. He didn't know what kind of special existence this child was for Gong Jie to treat her so seriously. Could it be? Hua Jin looked at Yo-Yo meaningfully. When he looked at Natalia, his gaze was unusually gentle. Hua Jin couldn't help but shiver. Could it be? This was Yo-Yo's future daughter-in-law? All right. Could it be that his main job was to raise Yo-Yo's daughter-in-law? At this thought, Hua Jin couldn't help but want to laugh. He held Yo-Yo's little hand and asked curiously, Do you like her? Yo-Yo didn't react at first and just nodded. Yes. Of course. He liked Natalia a lot. When Hua Jin heard this, he gave him a meaningful look. Is it that kind of like? When Yo-Yo realized what Hua Jin's look meant, he immediately came to his senses and said, It's not that kind of like. Then what kind of like is it? Hua Jin lowered his voice and said, I thought your uncle was raising your future daughter-in-law for you. When he said this, Yo-Yo couldn't help but blush even more. That's not it. Don't talk nonsense, okay? After a pause, Yo-Yo explained, It's probably the kind of like you have for a younger sister. Liar. When I saw you looking at Yu Yao, that wasn't the way you looked at her. Although he doted on her a little, the gentleness in his eyes when he looked at Natalia was definitely not just limited to sibling love. However, Hua Jin was just teasing him. How old was Yo-Yo? How could such a young child understand the love and affection of the adult world? It was probably because he liked her, so he wanted to treat her well purely because he liked her. Hua Jin deliberately teased him, Don't worry, I'll definitely help you raise your wife well. Bah. Yo-Yo started to threaten him. If you continue to spout nonsense, I'll get uncle to cripple you. Don't. Hua Jin clasped his hands together and begged for mercy. I was wrong, I know I was wrong. Hey, don't tell on me. Yo-Yo pulled Hua Jin to the side and whispered, Actually, my feelings for Natalia are pure. When I look at her, I feel like I'm looking at myself. Why? Because, Yo-Yo said in a low voice, actually, before this, she was adopted by a professor who specialized in the field of psychology and psychology. She was an orphan, but after the adoption, the professor used her as a test subject. Test subject? Hua Jin's expression turned solemn the moment he heard this term. It was inhumane. His mind immediately thought of examples such as human experiments and so on. How could it be so overboard? She was actually a normal child, but the professor wanted to study multiple personality disorder, so he cultivated a second personality in her. Hua Jin was smart and quickly understood what Yo-Yo meant by cultivating a second personality. Chapter 4088. Yo-Yo's expression was solemn. To be precise, it's not a preparation. It's already created. Hua Jin was dumbfounded. Is it possible to create such a personality? He had always thought that dual personality was either influenced by the environment or born with it. He had never heard that it could be cultivated by humans. How could someone use such a young child to do such a messy experiment? In the past, he admired scientists because they had contributed a lot to mankind. But now, Hua Jin felt a chill run down his spine when he heard about it. It was too terrifying. Dual personality is an extremely painful thing. How could he do that? It's probably because the adopted child has no blood relatives. So, he doesn't know how to cherish her and is not fit to be Natalia's father. So, Hua Jin looked at Gong Jie and suddenly changed his view of Gong Jie. He got Natalia's custody? Yes. Uncle has already gotten Natalia's custody. But you know that with his work, Natalia can't be by his side all the time. Otherwise, It would be very dangerous. So, when necessary, he needs someone to take care of her. You're a good candidate. Why? Hua Jin pointed at himself and was a little surprised. Why me? I'm also very busy with work. Because Uncle Hua Jin is very gentle. Yo-Yo smiled. You're so gentle to me. You'll be gentle to Natalia too. I believe you'll be good to Natalia. Hua Jin couldn't help but feel warm inside when he heard that. He didn't expect Yo-Yo to have such an image of him. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her. Yo-Yo raised her hand and stuck out her little finger. Okay, that's a promise. Okay. Hua Jin walked in front of Natalia and squatted down so that he was at eye level with her. Natalia, can you call me Daddy in the future? Hey, Daddy. Natalia blinked her beautiful eyes. She looked at him and then at Gong Jie. Her long eyelashes fluttered like butterfly wings. Hua Jin's heart melted just looking at her. He couldn't help but think that it would be great if this little girl in front of him was really his biological daughter, but then again, if it was his daughter who looked like him, she would definitely be very beautiful. Daddy? Yes. Hua Jin squeezed her little hand. Don't call me uncle. How about calling me Daddy? Natalia laughed. I have two dads. When Hua Jin heard this, he was also stunned. How could he have forgotten that Natalia already had Gong Jie as her daddy? Can I call you Mommy? Natalia said out of the blue. Hua Jin was instantly stunned. He asked hesitantly, why? Because Natalia's next sentence left Hua Jin at a loss as to whether he should laugh or cry. Because you're prettier than a flower. Also, you don't look like a man. Ha ha ha. When Yo-Yo heard this, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Chapter 4089. Hua Jin's face darkened completely. His fans acknowledged that he was prettier than flowers, so they gave him the nickname Hua Hua, which meant that he was prettier than flowers. But what did they mean by he didn't look like a man? Even a child was bullying him. Stop laughing. Hua Jin shouted angrily. Seeing that Yo-Yo was still laughing, he pushed his head lightly and said, I'm talking to you, don't laugh. I have to explain it properly so that you won't develop a gender identity disorder at such a young age. When Yo-Yo heard this, he stopped laughing and started to criticize Hua Jin seriously. Uncle Hua Jin, I feel that you were born with a gender identity disorder, so you can't blame her for this. You see, at least she knows that Uncle and I are men, but she mistook us for men. You really can't blame anyone else for this. When Hua Jin heard this, he raised both hands in surrender. He had already experienced Yo-Yo's sharp tongue. However, he still had to explain the matter seriously. Hua Jin turned around and said to Natalia seriously, I'm a man, not a woman. You can call me daddy, uncle, or brother, but you can't call me mommy, auntie, or sister. Do you understand? Looks like a man who has been hurt before, Yo-Yo added. Indeed, like auntie, sister, and the like. When Hua Jin wasn't famous yet, he would often hear these strange nicknames when he walked on the streets. Even when he became famous, he was still troubled by this. Many anti-fans and straight guys were jealous of him. He was obviously a man, but he looked like a woman. The anti-fans said that there were two female leads in his movies. Besides the real female lead, there was another female lead, which was the character that Hua Jin was playing. When Hua Jin first saw these comments, he was furious. He didn't understand where so many anti-fans came from, and he didn't know how many ghostwriters were involved. But later on, he gradually became numb to it. Later on, he seemed to have trained himself to be like an iron wall, and his heart wasn't as fragile as before. However, Hua Jin shook Yo-Yo. You can't say that I'm like a woman, otherwise, I will definitely be very sad. Very sad. Very sad. Yo-Yo was shaken until he was dizzy. He immediately hugged Hua Jin's shoulders and said softly, okay, I know. I won't joke with you anymore. Don't shake me anymore. Otherwise, I'll be broken. Gong Jie saw his nephew being shaken by Hua Jin like a puppet, but he turned a blind eye to it. Instead, he pulled Natalia in front of him and said gently, Daddy has work to do. You should follow this uncle and be good, okay? If he bullies you or mistreats you, tell Daddy. In the past few days, Gongjie and Natalia's relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. In fact, Gongjie hadn't wanted to adopt Natalia at all. To him, having another child was nothing more than having another burden. Moreover, she wasn't his biological child. He already had Yuyaro, this little princess. Hence, no matter how beautiful and cute Natalia was, he was indifferent. However, for some reason, after the adoption process was completed, Gongjie finally met Natalia formally under Alice's arrangement. Chapter 4090. He already had Yuyaro, his little princess. Therefore, no matter how pretty and cute Natalia was, he would not be moved. However, for some reason, after the adoption process was completed, Gongjie finally met Natalia formally under Alice's arrangement. To everyone's surprise, Natalia was especially close to the man the moment she saw him. Firstly, it was because Gongjie was tall and handsome. Secondly, the man inexplicably gave her a warm sense of security and belonging. For an orphan like Natalia, what she lacked the most was a sense of security and belonging. This was because she did not have the concept of home since she was young. Moreover, from the orphanage to the Michel Hospital, Natalia had never felt a sense of belonging. She did not know what a home was, but Gongjie gave her this kind of warmth. She wanted to rely on this man. At that time, Yo-Yo and Alice were also there. When they saw Natalia taking the initiative to throw herself into Gongjie's arms, they were extremely surprised. They had never thought that Natalia would be so close to anyone. Gongjie was also very surprised. He had only seen Natalia once. Moreover, at that time in the office, Natalia's attention was all on Yo-Yo. Obviously, she did not notice him. To be precise, this was probably the first time they had met. He was also very surprised that Natalia, who was as cold as a cat in front of Yo-Yo, would take the initiative to throw herself into his arms. Could it be that this was predestined fate? However, Natalia's throwing herself into his arms did not make him feel repulsed at all. In fact, he enjoyed this kind of closeness. Gongjie liked girls very much. He did not even think about getting married. However, he had thought about what his future daughter would look like. If she looked like him, then she would definitely look like Yunshusha. She would have a pair of beautiful and charming peach blossom eyes. Her pupils were sparkling, as if there was a vast galaxy hidden in them. She would have a small but perky nose, and pink lips that were like cherry blossoms. Her skin was white and clean, without a trace of impurities. Everything was as beautiful as a crystal. He had never imagined what his future other half would be like, but he had already thought of what his daughter would look like. She must be as beautiful as Yu Yao. However, he did not expect that he would adopt a daughter like Natalia. When she returned to the country, Natalia was afraid of strangers, but she was not afraid of him. She wasn't close to Yo-Yo or Alice, but she liked to cling to him. Especially at night, Natalia liked to hug him to sleep. At first, Gongjie didn't know what to do. He didn't know why, but at first, he felt that it was a little awkward for such a small girl to sleep so close to him. However, one day was fine, 2 days passed, and on the third day, he seemed to have gotten used to the identity of father. What was there to be awkward about? Natalia was his daughter. Even though they were not related by blood, they still treated each other as their own. In fact, for Gongjie, a sense of belonging and security was an extremely luxurious feeling. Even though he was born into a big family like the Gong family, it did not give him much sense of security. He had received military education from his father since he was young, and what was instilled in him was a cold concept. The warmth of a family was still in the memories of his mother and sister. Chapter 4091. This was also the reason why he was so reliant on Yunshusha. No one could replace the warmth that Yunshusha gave him. For some reason, Natalia felt close to him. In the beginning, she thought that such a man with such dazzling looks, handsome, tall, and strong arms would be able to carry her in his arms. Later, the usually cold Gongjie showed her a rare smile. Natalia was so disappointed that she was mesmerized by this smile. He was too handsome. She fantasized about how good it would be if this man was her father, her family. However, her dream came true. Alice told her that the man in front of her was her daddy and her future family. Natalia liked him more and more. Most likely, The two of them were destined to have such a bond in their fates. Even Hua Jin was surprised that Gong Jie would be so patient with a child. When Natalia heard that Gong Jie was going to leave, she immediately felt reluctant. Frowning, she hugged his arm and said softly, "Don't go." Gong Jie could not help but be moved by her words. It was as if there were roots under his feet, trapping him. He really couldn't bear to leave. The girl in his arms was like cotton candy. Such a pitiful expression, grievance, and longing melted his heart. He actually had an inexplicable feeling for this child. Could this be the legendary fatherly love? Gong Jie had always thought that he was the kind of man who was born with a lack of fatherly feelings. For a man like him, it was hard to imagine what kind of husband and father he would be if he started a family in the future. He didn't expect, he actually had self-awareness as a father. Hua Jin also said, Why don't you stay for a few days and keep her company? I'm not close to her. If you leave, I'll really be at my wit's end. Yo-Yo also said, Uncle, why don't you stay for a few more days? There's no hurry to deal with Hurricane. Gong Jie also nodded and agreed. All right. He squeezed Natalia's soft hand and comforted her. Then, Daddy will stay for a few days, okay? Natalia's smile widened. Okay. On the first day that Gong Jie stayed, Hua Jin realized a problem. It was true that he was rich. Sure. He could do whatever he wanted. Originally, he thought that even if the villa had been renovated and the furniture and appliances had been moved in, there would be no special smell after special treatment. However, it did not mean that there was no smell at all. Even though it had been ventilated for an entire afternoon, there was still a slight smell of paint. At night, although there was no obvious smell, Hua Jin still advocated not to move in for the time being. However, Gong Jie refused to comply. He complained that Hua Jin's place was as big as a fish tank. How could anyone live there? It was too cramped. Hua Jin was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Fish tank. It was a house of more than 100 square meters. How could it be a fish tank? It was too hurtful. As for Gong Jie, he immediately called the housekeeper and the cleaner. In a short while, the last bit of smell in the house dissipated. Yo-Yo also said that no matter how ventilated a new house was, if no one lived there, it would not have the smell of home.